very clear on how much money the national government spends in our respective counties. And I would want that the Finance Committee focuses even on that, Honorable Speaker. We want to know of the entire amount in my county on roads, for instance, on education, because I saw the President around, and most of the projects he was launching were projects that were either undertaken by the county government or by the national government, CDF, any reference to the county governments or indeed this House. But that spending, we have no sight over it. That spending will be spent.
Senator Chimera.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa fursa. Bi Joista Muchina nafikiri. Kwanza nipiane rambirambi zangu kwa familia ya mwenda zake kwa kufaa kutupatia usalama sisi kama wananchi, ndio wao wako mstari wa mbele kuhakikisha kwamba wametoa maisha ya binadamu wetu. Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, hatuai nafikiri sio sawa Bwana Spika. Nataka nipeane ilani kali sana kwa maafisa ambao watapatikana katika swala hili Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, vile vile nichukue fursa hii nizungumzie tu kuhusu pigwa vita na maafisa wetu wa usalama maafisa wa usalama kukosa hii ya usalama. Ifanye kazi yao kwa undani sana. Afisa atakayepatikana na hatua yoyote Bwana Spika, na nina imani kwamba kamati hii itaweza kufanya ambao wanakosa nidhamu na wanahakikisha kwamba wananchi wetu wanaweza kupoteza maisha yao kupitia mikononi mwao. Asante sana Bwana Spika.
Senator Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia taarifa ambaye amezungumzia masuala ya ugonjwa wa Kalazar, ambao ugonjwa huu umeingia katika kaunti za kaskazini. Wiki iliyokwisha tukizungumzia kaunti ya Marsabit na sasa tunazungumzia kaunti ya Wajir. Mheshimiwa Spika, zamani wakuwa afya ilikuwa haijagatuliwa, ilikuwa ni shida kuweza kupata wataalamu wa kuweza kupambana na majanga kama haya kwa muda mfupi zaidi, lakini inaonekana Mheshimiwa Spika, kaunti zetu hazijaweza kufanya mipango yoyote kuhusiana na magonjwa kama haya. Inakuwaje ugonjwa unaingia, wananchi wanafariki, sio Mheshimiwa Spika ambao unaweza kutibiwa na unaweza ili kupambana na masuala kama haya. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, ni muhimu kaunti zetu bunge hili liweze kuangalia ni vipi kaunti zetu zinapambana na majanga, kwa sababu hii inaonekana ni kwamba hakuna maandalizi yoyote katika kupambana na majanga kama haya ambayo yanatokea mara kwa mara katika kaunti zetu na kupoteza maisha ambayo tungeweza kuyaokoa kwa masuala kama haya. Mheshimiwa Spika, tulipopambana na janga la COVID, kaunti nyingi ziliweza kutibiwa na anaweza pia kuepuka iwapo kaunti zetu zitakuwa imara katika kuangalia afya ya umma katika maeneo yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, kushambuliwa na wanyamapori Mheshimiwa Spika katika maeneo yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili pia limekuwa ni donda sugu, na juzi tulipata fursa ya kukutania mwaka 2020 mpaka leo ili tujue kama malipo yanakwenda kulingana na wale ambao wameumia zamani ama malipo yanalipwa kulingana na wale wanaojua maofisa wanaolipa. Kwa sababu Mheshimiwa Spika, kuna wengi wana madai. Kama Spika, ni muhimu
1 minute, Honorable Senator.
Pia wamepeleka madai ghushi.
Take for instance the case of local assistant chiefs and chiefs. Initially there would even be security in their areas of operation. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the chiefs and assistant chiefs are just left with a swagger cane which they carry around all the meetings we engage in. So, Mr. Speaker, I feel as a country we now need to prioritize their welfare. Even we also need more security enhanced, especially in the border areas, because sometimes these officers are attacked by criminals who are hostile towards whatever they are doing, which is largely affecting their work, especially in the fight against illicit brew. Mr. Speaker, I also want to comment on the statement by Senator Joe Nyutu on the grade 8 young child who was actually killed. We are recently losing the future of this country because every day you read statistics on the national newspaper or media. We are reading of children who are either being molested, children who are being trafficked, children who are being sold even before they actually get to know what is in them in this country, Mr. Speaker. I also wish to comment on the issue, on the statement on dumping. Mr. Speaker, the issue about dumping is largely affecting county governments across this country. And such issues of low sanitation is what is actually even bringing the outbreaks of diseases which would otherwise have been prevented if we avoided disposing waste product anyhow, Mr. Speaker, so that we have a population which is actually responsible enough to avoid dumping, or systems of government which are able to ensure that we are providing, even in marketplaces or places where we are likely to encounter dumping, so that people have places to dispose waste products, Mr. Speaker. And finally, the issue of the welfare of police in this country. We cannot expect the police officers to give security whereas they live in a very sorry state. We need to also treat them as other officers who are serving in public service in this country, so that they are.
Honorable Speaker, I wish to associate myself with the statement sought by Senator Professor Tom Ojenda of Kisumu County regarding the floodings in the rainy season of the people of this country. There was a time that, Honorable Speaker, we had a problem in Lamu County whereby so many people were displaced, their properties destroyed, and Honorable Speaker, there was no compensation. Honorable Speaker, these are members of the Republic of this, actually, and they're supposed to be taken care by the government because, Honorable Speaker, they are taxpayers, and it is very important that in the event that such a disaster strikes, the national government takes in place or looks into these people so that, Honorable Speaker, they can be helped because actually, Honorable Speaker, they are vulnerable. Honorable Speaker, I also wish to urge the county governments, especially or particularly the governors of the 47 counties. Honorable Speaker, in most instances, the governors hide in the courts of the national government. Sometimes they are left the disasters to be dealt by the national government, whereas sometimes governors, or most of the times, they have a kitty that is supposed to help the citizens in the event that the disaster strikes. Honorable Speaker, it is very good, very well if the county government can see to it that they also chip in terms of helping members of the public that they represent in different parts of this country, so that, Honorable Speaker, that funds that has been allocated for disaster can enjoy the fruits of devolution. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Miraj.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa fursa hii, na mimi niweze kutilia pondo kutumia mamlaka yao vibaya. Pale kwetu kwenye gatuzi ya Mombasa, yuko mwanamke mmoja katika eneo la Likoni. Cha kusikitisha ni kwamba, cha kushangaza mpaka hakuna andikwa katika kituo cha polisi chochote, kwa sababu mume wa yule mwenda zake aliweza kwenda katika kituo cha polisi na alinyimwa hadi kuandika statement. Wanaopeana usalama, maafisa wa polisi, kituo cha Central Police kiko mita 100 kutoka uwanja wa Makadara Ground pale Mombasa. Cha kushangaza ni kwamba watoto wanaorandaranda waliweza kuwapiga mawe wananchi katika msimu huu, ashiria ya kwamba wananchi wa Kenya, Bwana Spika, wako peke yao, hakuna mtu wa kuwaangalia, hakuna mtu wa kuwalinda. Bwana Spika, nikimalizia, tunaelekea katika msimu wa mvua nyingi, na kwa hakika alivyozungumza seneta wa Lamu ni kweli. kwamba kuna mifuko kando kando ya serikali kuu, serikali ya ugatuzi na hata katika mifuko ya hazina ya CDF bado kuna pesa ya kusaidia. Ona sasa serikali, rais ameonyesha mfumo mzuri wa kuweka viongozi wote pamoja. Kwa nini maeneo kama ya Nyali Links ambao tunajua miaka nenda miaka rudi, mvua inaponyesha kupita kiasi maji hayapiti? Kwa mfano, tunapozungumzia kuwatayarisha wananchi vifaa, wale wahudumu ambao watapeana huduma ya kwanza, tunazungumzia ya kwamba wakati tunajua maji mingi yanaingia katika maeneo fulani na fulani, kuwe na shule ambazo tayari zimetayarishwa kuwapokea wale ambao ni waathiriwa wa masuala kama yale. Bwana Spika, tunaomba sisi kama bunge la Seneti tusiwe
Senator Hazana.
Mr. Speaker, mine is a request that you, if you deem it fit, to kindly refer my statement on the gang attacks in Samburu County to the relevant committee, especially the Committee on Interior and National, to the Committee on Security, given that it's a different matter from what Senator Lelegu had raised last week. This is about attacks in the towns. Thank you.
When you rose to make your request, you requested your matter to be taken to which committee?
To the Committee on Security, Mr. Speaker.
So be it. Senator Chute.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I want to contribute on 3 statements. Statement number 1 is for Senator for Lamu. Honorable Speaker, the problem facing this country today from all the 47 counties are some governors are claiming to be having about 35% to up to 36% money on development. But if you go to those counties and see what they've done, it is less than 5%. So the issue that is on the newspaper, written everywhere, oh, this county is at 40%, 30%, 15%, but then in actual sense, development is at almost less than 10%, specifically northeastern counties. One of the counties which was given position number 1, is County of Marsabit, is at 36%. And I have a statement in that regard. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at what is happening in Marsabit, we are even at 6%. So I think I want to support what Senator for Lamu has brought, and I would want the committee concerned, Committee of Devolution, let them look at development projects in all the 47 counties. Let me also contribute on my friend, Senator Wajir Abbas Sheikh Mohammed. Honorable Speaker, last week I raised this issue on Kalaza. And I asked my friend, do you have any issue in Wajir? He said, no, I don't have any issue. And today he told me, my friend, my people are dying. And according to him, almost 15 people died. Honorable Speaker, Turkana County has similar problems, similar. And if you look at what the government is trying to do, they are trying to vaccinate animals to the tune of 22 million head of cattle. Why do you spend that money on animals? Why don't you spend that money on human people? People are dying, human beings. So I think with the broad-based government now, I think we have to think of how we are going to push these things and start caring about human lives. Number 3, Honorable Speaker, I will be added 1 minute. On the issue of KWS. Honorable Speaker, I raised this issue some time back on the issue of compensation. I want the committee, if you go to KWS...
Seconds to conclude.
Please invite KWS, Treasury, even the leaders from the 47 counties. Let them come and say their matters. So let us take this matter very seriously and once and for all solve this problem. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Eddy.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, there's a statement here by the Senator for Kisumu on the viability, sustainability, and safety of Ombei dump site in Muhoroni sub-county, Kisumu County. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the statements, and I know that sometimes, or many times, Mr. Speaker, you're very, lenient, and you allow us to discuss issues as a House and in the committees without your hands in it. But, Mr. Speaker, I also know your leadership capability in terms of sometimes convening us in meetings that we call Kamukunji in this House to discuss matters of national importance as well as matters that affect the House. Mr. Speaker, this is a crisis statement. Have you imagined, Mr. Speaker, how we are dealing with waste management in our counties? Mr. Speaker, Migori County, where I come from, there is no any dump site. There is no any strategy of managing waste. There is no any instrument, infrastructure of managing waste where 1.2 million people are living, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the kind of diseases that we are seeing emerging in our counties today, among them, Mr. Speaker, respiratory issues. If you think about air pollution that is coming in our counties, if you think at issues of eating crops that sewerages and open defecation, Mr. Speaker, are going into, the kind of lifestyle diseases that our people are facing today, Mr. Speaker, is just because of that lack of waste management, Mr. Speaker. I want you to imagine, Mr. Speaker, even in our hospitals today and all our health facilities, think about it, Mr. Speaker, the amount of clinical wastes that are coming from these health facilities. Have we ever stopped to think about where are these clinical waste going to? If today there's a clinical waste from any hospital in our counties, Mr. Speaker, where do they go to? Mr. Speaker, I think that even as you commit this particular statement to the relevant Committee of Health, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to invite your conscience. I want to prick your conscience, Mr. Speaker, that you can convene this House in a Kamkunji, Mr. Speaker, that it is high time as a House we discuss the issue of waste management in our counties and devise a way that can be able to deal with a strategy that can call upon our governors to invest on health matters the same way we have dealt with the issue of pending bills in the counties, Mr. Speaker, so that even as we send money to counties, Mr. Speaker, health management and in terms of waste management, Mr. Speaker, can become a priority in our counties. I support this statement, but I call your attention to it, Mr. Speaker, more than just a commitment to the committees. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Senator Mutinda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to start by commenting on the statement by Senator for Kisumu County, Senator Senior Counsel, in regards to the issue of the floods, which go back a bit of a step in regards to this issue, which is very critical of waste management. Mr. Speaker, the essence of having a devolved government at this particular time, from when the decision was made, was to ensure that we have counties that are beautiful cities, counties that are also very accommodative to our people. We are in the rainy season, Mr. Speaker. From what we've seen previously happening, and the damages that come also with the heavy rainfalls that end up causing high levels, we leave our people at risk. We end up having high cost because now we are dealing with crisis. Instead of this particular moment having a preventive measure, Mr. Speaker, issues that range from our people are not able to have mobility because the roads have been completely damaged, they are flooded, the issue of this particular waterborne diseases that arise that affect from the young to the old, Mr. Speaker. So these are issues that the counties should be able to give the strategy management that they have, and also put competent people who are qualified to deal with disaster management crisis. This issue of just putting someone who's not even knowledgeable when it comes to matters waste management is then really affecting these counties. Mr. Speaker, allow me to also touch on the statement by Senator of Muranga, John Yotu, the statement that talks about this young soul of Class 8, Miss Mudhoni, in Muranga County, a young soul, Mr. Speaker, where we are as a country is so sickening, it's so saddening. The other few weeks we saw a rogue pastor from Nakuru County who has put churches across these different cities and is molesting young boys. And this is where, as parents, as a nation, we've, trusted the church, Mr. Speaker. And you find that a whole rogue pastor would be subjecting young kids to these issues of molestation. We want justice for Ms. Mudhoni, Mr. Speaker, on the relevant committee of security. Justice needs to be served for this young soul, for Christ's sake. A girl who has chosen to go to undertake.
1 minute, you conclude your remarks, Honorable Senator.
Touch now on the issue of the police from this Kanyenyaine police station, who, according to this statement, he said, after his hulabaloo and after he's gone crazy and started beating everyone, what the institution did was to transfer. The question is very simple. How do you transfer one problem from one area to the other? How are we really solving this problem? What should have happened and what should still happen is that this particular officer should be taken for mental health services. He should be taken for counseling. You cannot now remove one problem to the other, putting in mind the kind of problems that we have, the femicide issues that are in place, our young boys and girls. Mr. Speaker, we request that the recommendation from the security committee should be that this officer should serve as an example. Officers are not bad. I've just come from seeing one of the patients who actually, a very good police, was able to rescue them and take them to the nearest very good hospital without looking at any other thing. And they are very good police in this country. We appreciate them. But even those ones who undergo challenges, and because challenges are there, Mr. Speaker, they are there. And we've stated them. So these are also our brothers and sisters. He should be taken to the nearest health center for medical processing and all that before he's even transferred to his next place of work, so that he is able to undertake treatment the way it is required, Mr. Speaker. And finally, on the issue of people have a right to communicate, to express their freedom. It can be when people express their freedom on concerns, then they are subjected to punishment. Mr. Speaker, it's wrong, and this is in regards to the lady, Miss Lucy Murage and Nancy, as the senator had already put about on baby Ezra, when they were voicing out on the concerns about how this baby was killed. A young soul again. Which future generation are we working for? Which laws are we setting for the young generation to be, Mr. Speaker? If the same institutions cannot be able to be responsible for our young people, where will our children go, Mr. Speaker? With those many and few, we hope that the Standing Committee of Security will fast-track these issues. And, Mr. Speaker, let us speed on the reports for statements. Let us get quick feedbacks so that there is action that is also taken. Thank you so much.
Senator Mazayo.
Wanaingilia wakati kama mimi nimesimama.
Take a seat, Senator Fokile.
Mr. Speaker, Senator Mazayo is my boss. When I walked in, Mr. Speaker, I was hardly unable to recognize him, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm just rising on a point. I want to clarify from you whether Senator Mazayo is properly dressed for the mission that he wants to undertake in this House. I thank the Speaker.
Honorable Wambua, religious attire is one of the dress code that is allowable under the Speaker's rules. Senator Mazayo, proceed.
Mstahiki Spika, nataka kujiunga na taarifa iliyotolewa hapa na ndugu yetu Profesa Ojenda wa Kisumu, na ni kweli naunga mkono taarifa hii ya kwamba mambo ya mafuriko katika Kenya, hususan pande za Kisumu, pande za Nyando, maeneo ya Nyando, huwa yanachangamkiwa sana na mafuriko, na zaidi sana huwa tunaona kwamba wananchi wanaweza kupoteza maisha yao. Bwana Spika, tukizingatia vile vile hali ya mafuriko, ni wakati wa mvua ukifika, hakuna hata siku moja tumeweza kuona serikali yetu hii ya KK ikiweka kipaumbele mambo ya mafuriko. Kitu tunaona tu ni kwamba wananchi wengi wanachukuliwa na maji wakati wa mafuriko, wengine wanafariki, wengine wanaweza kutolewa katika maeneo ambayo yako chini kule walikoweza kujisitiri kimaisha kama nyumbani kwao, na hatimaye vile vile wale watu wetu wakaweza kuchukuliwa wakawekwa katika maeneo ambayo yako juu kidogo na mtu huko chini. Bwana Spika, nakumbuka hata katika wakati si mrefu sana, lakini kama ni karne moja, ni kama miaka kama 5 hivi 6, nikikumbuka upande wetu wa Kilifi County pia tulikuwa na janga hili la mafuriko, na wakati mwingi tukapatikana na janga kama hili la mafuriko, inakuwa shida. Watoto, kina mama ndio wanapata tabu, hata wazee, kwa sababu maeneo yao wale wanaoishi wanaoita nyumbani yanachukuliwa na maji, yanaenda. Mifugo inachukuliwa na maji, yanaenda. Hata kuku pia wanachukuliwa na maji, pia wanaenda. Na alafu hasara inakuwa kubwa sana. Bwana Spika, ingekuwa vyema ikiwa serikali inaweza kujiandaa na kujitayarisha vyema vizuri, kuona ya kwamba wakati huu ambao mafuriko yanatarajiwa kuja, kama ukienda upande wa Bunyala, utaona kila siku, kila mwaka ujao na uchao, kila tukiendelea, mafuriko kule yanaua watu, yamechukua maeneo fulani. Kwa hiyo katika statement hii ningependa sana ilinganishwane katika maeneo yote katika nchi ya Kenya, kuonekana kule ambako kuna kuwa na mafuriko ya ambao yanaweza kuleta maisha ya wananchi kuweza kupata tabu na kuweza kuondoka manyumbani kwao na kuweza kupoteza mifugo na nyumba zao. Makaburi pia saa nyingine yanaoshwa. Kwa hiyo tunaona kwamba ni umuhimu serikali iweze kujiandaa na iweze kuona sasa wakati huu ambao unakuja, wakati wa mvua, imezingatia mambo ya mafuriko. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Senator Abbas.
Mr. Speaker, actually it's very unfortunate this country, at the rate at which the public land is disappearing, is so worrying. One thing people don't know is that when they see big land, they develop a lot of avidity to grab it. But that land is meant, like the prisons, to do, to plant, do some kind of irrigation or food planting, do for training, to train the inmates, and then you get the food from there to subsidize whatever the government is giving, the little money that the government is giving. The land is never idle. But you know, any Kenyan who makes little money wants to grab every land. Honorable Speaker, I want to inform the House that the other day we were in a committee of agriculture, and I was shocked that the land belonging to Kenya Vaccine Production Institute in Limuru was grabbed, somebody grabbed 20 acres. They went to court. The land is 151 acres. And instead of getting back the 20, the court ruled that they forfeit the entire land of 150 acres. Where are we going in this country? The judiciary is just there. People are grabbing land. The courts are not protecting the land for the public. So, this business of grabbing land, and public land, I think that needs to be, the anti-corruption must come out and reclaim back the public land. With those few remarks. Also, I want to add that the issue of the police officer, Honorable Speaker, this country is actually having a problem. The police officers are supposed to be disciplined forces. They should need to give the best example. But of course, what's happening today, haphazard shootings, people being killed, people being kidnapped, children being, mishandled, women mishandled in the prisons, in the police custody. It's a very unfortunate situation. I think there is need to take action. It's not, what happens is actually most of these police officers who misbehave are transferred to maybe either to Wajir or Mandera or Turkana or Samburu. And that is why you're seeing there's no law and order in those places. They are taken as the law of jungles, and they can do anything they want. I think they should not be transferred. The police officers who are indisciplined should not be transferred. They should be disciplined or sacked or taken back for trainings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Onyonka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to, first of all, commend my brother, Honorable Chute, for bringing this issue, which is very substantive, because you have an issue, Mr. Speaker, where all of us do not know what to do, because you have this private land, like Honorable Abbas has said, which is being taken over by private individuals and companies, and when somebody goes to court to sort out the issue, you find that the courts are not delivering fair judgment and all that. And I really wish that they commit, because we don't. The second issue, Mr. Speaker, is on the attacks that are happening in Samburu County. Mr. Speaker, when you look at her statement to station at a place in Simatown, there was also a raid by gangs, and the third one, Mr. Speaker, is where a businessman was killed. I think the CS for Interior should seriously consider this matter, because this is not the only issue that has been brought out on what is happening internally. Kenyans have the capacity, the security forces can do their job. Can we make sure that people are safe and our country is operationalized? Finally, it's okay, Mr. Speaker. Senator Eddy can inform me.
Senator Eddy, you may proceed to inform your colleague.
Mr. Speaker, my brother, Senator Onyonka, wasn't here in the morning, which is forms the basis of my information to him. When the CS for Defense appeared, and the senator for Meru, and is on record, did get up and indicated that there is some semblance of peace that has been found in that region. So I wanted to inform the senator for Kisii that what the senator for Meru implied at the background of this statement is actually not true, and therefore, as he contributes, he can be able to further that thought that we haven't had enough peace in Samburu, as well as Baringo, because this problem is still going on, and we need to fight and make sure that they are dealt with for once and for all, even as this statement has been contributed. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Onyonka, if you find that information useful, you may take it. If not, you may proceed with your remarks.
Thank you, sir. Senator Eddy, I didn't find that statement useful, that information, but I accept the data you've given me. Finally, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the human wildlife conflict in Lamu County, another matter that needs to be handled with care and with urgency, because this is not the first time it's happening. I believe that the committees responsible should interrogate these matters as soon as possible, because the small incidents you see happening, Mr. Speaker, will degenerate and end up becoming some of the big issues that affect our country. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to vent on this issue.
Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to make a comment on the statement brought to the House by Senator Tomo Jenda on the matter of the suitability and safety of Ombei dump site in Kisumu County. Mr. Speaker, there's a reason why the drafters of the Constitution in the fourth schedule, part 2, assigned the responsibility of refuse removal, dumps and solid waste disposal, assigned that responsibility to county governments. The Speaker, even as I thank Senator Ojienda for coming up with this statement, it is my considered view, Mr. Speaker, that even as the committee retreats to look at this statement, this matter is a lot more weightier than just a statement being canvassed in a committee. Mr. Speaker, this is a matter, in my own view, that perhaps the senator would have considered bringing a motion in this House. Because, the Speaker, the issue of waste disposal and management in our counties has actually reached alarming levels. The Speaker, you know, there is this old adage that every waste that has been generated in a county then should be recycled, and people get products from the recycled solid waste. But, Mr. Speaker, we refuse to think slightly deeper than that and realize that, Mr. Speaker, first of all, not every waste is biodegradable. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have hospitals, dispensaries, health centers scattered all over our counties that nobody really looks into the issue of clinical waste management. Mr. Speaker, and I whispered this a few minutes to you ago, I had the misfortune of getting a story from a parent of a child who went on dump site in a county, I don't want to mention the county now, Mr. Speaker, and came back home with pieces of what looked like rotten flesh, which actually could have been human flesh. Mr. Speaker, the issue of management of waste in counties, both solid and liquid, is a matter for which I would urge a committee of health, if that's where this statement will end up, to consider developing a motion, which motion will set a process of every county, every senator, to go back to their counties and do a review of how waste in those counties is being managed, Mr. Speaker. And we come back here, there's 47 of us, and discuss waste management in our counties, Mr. Speaker. There is a problem in waste management in counties. That problem cannot be cured through a statement, though this is really a move in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Honorable Senators, before I allow the clerk to call the next order, allow me to pass this message. Honorable Senators, I wish to report to the Senate that I have, pursuant to Standing Order 46.3, received the following message from the Speaker of the National Assembly regarding the decision of the National Assembly on the Senate Amendment Wednesday, 12th March 2025. Pursuant to Standing Order 46.4, I now report the message. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 41.1 and 148B of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the following message from the National Assembly. Whereas on Wednesday, the 6th of December 2023, the National Assembly passed the Gambling Control Bill, National Assembly Bill number 70 of 2023, and thereafter referred the bill to the Senate for consideration in accordance with Article 110(4) of the Constitution. And whereas on Tuesday, the 8th of October, with the provisions of Article 112(1)(b) of the Constitution. Further, whereas on Thursday, 16th of January 2025, the National Assembly negatived a motion on consideration of the Senate amendments to accordance with the provisions of Article 112(2)(b) of the Constitution. Now, therefore, in accordance with the provisions of Article 112 of the Constitution and Standing Orders 41.1 and 148B of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the said decision of the National Assembly to the Senate and seek the appointment of 9 senators to a mediation committee to consider the bill in accordance with Article 113 of the Constitution. Honorable Senators, consequent to the said decision, the Speaker of the National Assembly appointed the following members of the National Assembly to the mediation committee to consider the bill in accordance with Article 113 of the Constitution. The Honorable Daniel Wanyama, CBS MP, the Honorable Omboko Milema, CBS MP, the Honorable CPA Kuria Kimani, CBS MP, the Honorable Kwenya Thuku, MP, the Honorable Dr. Ariko Namoit, MP, the Honorable Mark Nyamita, MP, and Honorable Dr. Irene Kasalu, MP. Now, Honorable Senators, pursuant to Article 113 of the Constitution and Standing Order 166-2 of the Senate, and in consultation with the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader, I have appointed the following senators to the Mediation Committee. 1, Senator Wakili Hilary Sigei, CBS MP, Senator Catherine Muma, MP, Senator Alan Kiprotich Chesang, MP, Senator Eddie Gisheru Okech, MP, Senator Julius Mugo Recha, CBS MP, Senator Isa Juma Boy, MP, Senator Beatrice Akinyi Ogola, MP, Senator Rafael Chimera Mwinzagu, MP, and Senator Esther Anyeni Okenyuri, MP. The Mediation Committee will attempt to develop a version of the bill that both houses will pass and table its report in both houses of Parliament. The House is so guided. Next order, Clerk.
Order number 8, motion. Consideration of the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the 2025 Budget Policy Statement, Division.
Clerk, do we have the requisite number? So that order is deferred. Next order.
Order number 9, motion. Consideration of the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the 2025 Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy. Resumption of debate.
Now, Honorable Senators, at the interruption of debate, Senator Daniel Manzo had the floor with a balance of 13 minutes. He's not in the House, and therefore the floor is open. Senator Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fedha na bajeti ya bunge hili kuhusiana na mipango ya kudhibiti madeni katika mwaka 2025-26. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza ni kuwa hatuna habari nzuri kuhusiana na deni katika nchi yetu, kwa sababu deni limepanda kutoka trilioni 10.2 kufikia Juni mwaka jana mpaka trilioni 11 kufikia Januari 31 mwaka huu. Na deni hili Mheshimiwa Spika limeongezeka likiwa ni pamoja na deni la nyumbani la karibu trilioni 5.6 na deni la kimataifa yani la kutoka nchi za nje ambalo ni trilioni 5.4. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, katika mipango kama hii iliyoletwa mwaka jana, Hazina Kuu walikuwa wamependekeza kwamba 5 ya mapato ya nchi wana mipango ya kuipunguza polepole kufikia mwaka 2027 deni hiyo itakuwa imefika katika kiwango cha 55% ambacho ndio sheria ambayo tulipitisha mwaka juzi inasema kuhusiana na deni ambalo liko katika nchi. Na mwelekeo ulioko Mheshimiwa Spika ni kuwa hili viwango vya deni hili havitapungua mpaka mwaka 2030. Na kwa sababu hiyo ndio kumeletwa mswada wa marekebisho ya sheria ya fedha yani Public Finance Management Act kuna mapendekezo ya kuibadilisha ili ile muhula wa kuhudumu uwe uanze wakati sheria hii itakapobadilishwa kuliko vile ambavyo tulipitishwa mwaka 2023. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu hiyo ni kuwa tuendelea kuchukua deni na deni hili litaweza kuathiri vizazi vijavyo. Kwamba deni hili ambalo tunachukua sasa, Mheshimiwa Spika, mara nyingine hata hazina kuu haiwezi kueleza pesa zile zimetumika kivipi. Kwa mfano, Mheshimiwa Spika, jana tulipokuwa na mkutano wa kamati ya fedha na bajeti, Waziri Mbadi alieleza kamati kwamba mnamo tarehe 22 mwezi Agosti mwaka 2022 kulichukuliwa deni, kabla serikali hii ya sasa kuingia, kulichukuliwa deni la bilioni kadhaa, bilioni 41 nafikiri kama sikukosea. Na Mheshimiwa Spika hakuweza kueleza yeye kama waziri deni lile lilitumika kwa mambo gani katika nchi yetu. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, tunaona kwamba deni zinachukuliwa lakini hatuoni miradi yote ya kiserikali ambayo inafanyika. Vile vile kuna madeni ambayo yamechukuliwa lakini miradi haijaanza. Leo hapa asubuhi kulikuwa na waziri wa fedha wa maji akisema kwamba hakuna pesa za kulipa ridhaa wale ambao ardhi zao zinachukuliwa kwa ile miradi ya maji. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiangalia katika wizara ya mawasiliano na barabara, kuna miradi mingi ambayo imeanzishwa kupitia kwa ufadhili wa hisani wetu, lakini serikali haijaweza kulipa ridhaa wale ambao ardhi zao zinachukuliwa ili barabara zile ziweze kujengwa. Karibu nafikiri bilioni 200 zinahitajika, Mheshimiwa Spika, kulipa ridhaa wale ambao ardhi zao zinachukuliwa ili miradi ile iweze kufanyika. Kwa hivyo utapata, Mheshimiwa Spika, pesa zimekopwa, zimekaa katika akaunti, lakini hakuna kitu ambacho kinafanyika. Pesa ziko katika benki lakini hakuna mradi unaendelea kwa sababu serikali haijaweza kuwalipa ridhaa wale ambao na ardhi zao zinaathirika na miradi ile. Vile vile kuna zile pesa ambazo zinalipwa kama inaitwa commitment fee ambao serikali inalipa. Na pesa hizi zinalipwa lakini hakuna kitu ambacho kinafanyika. Kwa hivyo tunaendelea kulipa madeni, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati ile miradi ambayo inatakana kufanyika iliyofadhiliwa na miradi ile, Mheshimiwa Spika, haijaweza kufanya kazi, na vile vile pia ikaonekana kwamba kuna mazao yanapatikana katika miradi ile. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo lingine ni kuwa serikali inavyokopa ndivyo ambavyo inazuia wafanyabiashara nchini kwetu kuweza kukopa na waweze kufanya biashara zao na waweze kupata faida ili waendelee kulipa kodi. Kwa sababu ikiwa serikali inashindana na wafanyabiashara katika mabenki kukopa pesa, serikali itaweza kukopa zaidi kuliko wafanyabiashara, kwa sababu serikali ina ile tunaita security ama ithibati ya kutosha kuhakikisha kwamba ule mkopo utalipwa. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, wale ambao wanakopa kama wafanyabiashara kibinafsi, wengine wamechukua mikopo kufanya miradi ya county. Hivi sasa serikali za county hazilipi. Vile vile wengine wamechukua mikopo kufanya miradi ya serikali kuu hailipi madeni yale. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, wengi miradi ya pesa, kwa mfano ufadhili katika benki hizi, Mheshimiwa Spika, utapendelea zaidi wachukue mikopo ya serikali kwa sababu wana uhakika kwamba deni zao zitalipwa kuliko kwa mtu binafsi ambaye ni mfanyabiashara, na hivyo basi biashara zitakufa na hatutaweza kukusanya kodi ya kutosha kuweza kulipia mikopo ile. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la mwisho kwa nataka kuzungumzia ni kwamba japokuwa serikali kuu ina nafasi ya kukopa, serikali za kaunti hazina nafasi kama hiyo ya kuweza kukopa. Ikiwa watataka kukopa lazima wapitie kwa hazina kuu na kupata ruhusa ya kukopa huko, Mheshimiwa Spika, mara nyingi huwa ni shida kuweza kukopa. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tunasema kwamba kwanza serikali lazima ipunguze matumizi yake. Si lazima wajenge masoko, si lazima kujengwe nyumba hizi ambazo zaitwa za wastani ili wananchi waweze kupata nyumba zile, Mheshimiwa Spika, yani affordable housing, Mheshimiwa Spika. Si lazima tufanye sasa, kwa sababu uchumi wetu kwa sasa hauwezi kubeba miradi yote hiyo, na watuweze kupata maendeleo ambayo yatatuwezesha sisi kusonga mbele. Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia katika sehemu nyingi miradi hii ya affordable imekwama kwa sababu ya ukosefu wa pesa. Hata wale wafanyabiashara wa kibinafsi ambao waliwekeza katika miradi hii, wengi wameshindwa kuweza kuuza nyumba hizi kwa sababu hakuna pesa mifukoni mwa Wakenya. Wakenya wengi hawawezi kudhibiti malipo ambayo yanatakana kulipia kila mwezi ama kila mara kwa mara ili waweze kuweza kuziweka nyumba hizi. Ukiangalia Mheshimiwa Spika, kuanzia Jumatatu na Jumanne labda mpaka Jumatano, kuna kurasa zaidi ya 10 katika magazeti ambayo inaonyesha mali za Wakenya zinauzwa kwa sababu ya ukosefu wa kulipa madeni ambao wanachukua. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hakuna haja ya kujenga nyumba hizi alafu nyumba zibaki mahame. Nyumba zihamie popo na wanyama wengine wanaishi katika nyumba hizo, wakati wa Kenya hawawezi kumiliki nyumba hizo, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo hii pia serikali kuu kuingilia kazi za county, Mheshimiwa Spika. Unasikia kuna jengwa soko na serikali kuu mjini Mombasa. Wakati soko lile inapaswa kujengwa na kaunti ya Mombasa. Kilifi wanajengewa masoko. Ardhi za county zinachukuliwa na serikali kuu kujengwa miradi ambayo serikali za county inaweza kufanya. Tulipata Mheshimiwa Spika, tulipata experience kama hii wakati serikali kuu ilipokuja kujenga Mama Ngina waterfront. Wakasema sisi tutajenga hii alafu tutapeana kwa serikali ya kaunti ya Mombasa. Wakati huo waziri wa utalii alikuwa ni Mheshimiwa Balala. Haya, ikatoka title deed ya Mama Ngina waterfront ikapelekwa treasury kwa sababu imewekeza katika mradi ule wa Mama Ngina waterfront. Title deed sasa imetoka, nimeambiwa imekwenda katika, imerudi tena katika jenda, ofisi ya jenda, Mheshimiwa Spika. Sasa tunapelekwa huku na huku kama kupigwa mpira, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati tunadai haki kama hiyo. Kwa hivyo hii miradi yote ambayo serikali kuu inapanga kufanya, wacha ifanywe na serikali za county. Kama kuna pesa zitaka kufanya miradi hii, haiwezekani kwamba upande mmoja wanazuia pesa kuja kwenye county. Tulipigana hapa katika kujadili division of revenue mpaka tukaenda mediation kwa sababu serikali ilikuwa haina pesa za kutosha. Wakatuongezea labda bilioni 5 peke yake kwenye zile ambazo walikuwa wamepanga kupeleka katika kaunti zetu. Na hivi sasa naona katika mwaka unaofuata pia, Mheshimiwa Spika, kutakuwa na mvutano sana kwa sababu kamati yetu ya fedha imependekeza bilioni 400 na 65. Na najua hapo kutakuwa na mvutano kwa sababu serikali kuu haiko tayari kupeleka pesa hizo katika kaunti. Lakini tukiangalia ile miradi ambayo serikali kuu inafanya, masoko wataka kujenga wao, nyumba wataka kujenga wao, Mheshimiwa Spika, pesa hizi zikikusanywa pamoja ni kidogo kuliko zile, ni nyingi kuliko zile ambalo sisi hivi sasa tumependekeza zipelekwe katika kaunti zetu kama mgao wa mwaka 2025 2026. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, kumalizia ni kwamba naunga mkono ripoti hii ambayo imeletwa na kamati hii yetu ya fedha na bajeti, na kwa tujaribu Mheshimiwa Spika kuhakikisha kwamba tunaiweka serikali mahali pake kwa masuala ya mikopo. Kwa sababu Mheshimiwa Spika, mikopo mingi ambayo yachukuliwa, na niliona hapa tulipofungua bunge ililetwa ile ripoti ya madeni ya nchi, lakini hatujapata fursa ya kuijadili kwa sababu tulikuwa tunajadiliana masuala ya hii budget policy statement pamoja na hii medium term debt management strategy. Lakini baada ya hapo tutaingilia masuala hiyo ya deni kwa sababu deni ndilo ambalo linatukwaza zaidi sisi wa Kenya katika kupata maendeleo yale ambayo tunastahili kuyapata kutoka kwa nchi yetu. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii.
Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to also debate this report on the medium-term debt management strategy of 2025. Mr. Speaker, it is possible for Kenya to be debt-free. It is not a dream, it's not a wish, it is possible. In the world, there are examples of countries that have managed to control their spending, to manage their finances to the extent that the debt to GDP ratio has become so insignificant that these countries have been named as debt-free. An example, Mr. Speaker, that is always given is Hong Kong, the Sultanate of Brunei, and the country known as Timor-Leste. These countries, Mr. Speaker, they have done something that is doable even within Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, even within the continent of Africa, despite the fact that we have so much debt as a combined continent, there are countries that have managed to secure their financial management system to the extent that the debt to GDP ratio has become so small that we laud them as countries that are almost heading towards debt-free status. Mr. Speaker, DRC here has a 6% debt to GDP ratio. If you look at a country like Namibia, Mr. Speaker, has 22% GDP to debt to GDP ratio. The country known as Sao Tome and Principe has a debt to GDP ratio of 32%. So what is this telling us, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, it is telling us even Kenya, with the correct approach and with the correct strategy, Kenya has been able to head towards a debt-free status. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the Committee of Finance, led by Senator Roba, for the fact that they have sat down and looked at possible ways in which we can manage our debt. Mr. Speaker, as stated by previous speakers on this matter, we are not in a good place as a country. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the report shows that we have continued to depend largely on domestic borrowing in this country, which has continued to squeeze credit that would have been available for traders and would have helped to stir economic development. Now, having said all that, people should not imagine that debt is a bad thing. In fact, debt is a very important tool for economic development. But it has to be sustainable. It has to be managed in a manner that will give results, that debt must be able to give the results that are intended. Mr. Speaker, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, our former minister in charge of the Treasury, has explained this very well, even in his academic writings, that debt in itself is not a bad thing, but are we managing it well? are we doing well as a country? Mr. Speaker, like the previous speaker said, our public debt stock has risen so much. In fact, as of January 2025, the total public and publicly guaranteed debt stock in Kenya was standing at 11.02 trillion. And Mr. Speaker, this is projected to rise further. And we are told from the report that by June 2027, it is projected that this public debt and the publicly guaranteed debt will go to 13 trillion by June 2027. So, Mr. Speaker, are we doing well in terms of managing our debt? I think we have a problem. And that is why today, Mr. Speaker, I am very, very proud of the report and the recommendations that were made by our Senate committee. Mr. Speaker, the debt in itself, the debt stock and the servicing has great costs. And in Kenya, these costs continue to rise with the rise in the stock of public debt and the publicly guaranteed debt. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the recommendations that have been put, they need to be implemented, Mr. Speaker, at the highest speed possible. And some of these recommendations, Mr. Speaker, they have to do with transparency. Mr. Speaker, if you look at that report, it says the National Treasury, the Central Bank, and the Controller of Budget should fully automate the withdrawal of debt service payments from the Consolidated Fund by 31st May 2025. Additionally, an interagency report on the implementation status of these recommendations should be submitted to Parliament 15 days after the 31st May 2025. What is this recommendation saying, Mr. Speaker? It is saying that the withdrawal of the debt service payments are not automated. They are not fully automated, at least. What does it mean, Mr. Speaker? It means some monies can actually be withdrawn and they're supposed to be servicing debts or servicing the cost of debt, and yet we are dealing with paperwork that is physical. What does it mean, Mr. Speaker? We all know that when matters are not automated, when there is human interference, it means there is a possibility of pilferage, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this Senate report is telling us that in fact there's no transparency even in withdrawing the money and making those payments. Mr. Speaker, it is a shame. We have been independent for many decades now, and it cannot be that payment for withdrawal for payments on servicing our debt, part of it is manual. This is what it is suggested here, Mr. Speaker. I pray that by the 31st of May 2025, we will receive a report in this Senate that will be telling us that they have automated that. Because, Mr. Speaker, when you leave it to human interference, human judgments, it means this cost of debt is not what we are paying. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, is not really what is supposed to be paid. The ones that is automated, we can always look at from Treasury, from the Central Bank, and, Mr. Speaker, it's manual. How can that be, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, I fully agree with this recommendation that the Central Bank must surely make arrangements to have these withdrawals to be automated. Mr. Speaker, there is also lack of financial controls, Mr. Speaker. And the Senate, sitting here, has recommended that timeliness of public debt statistics and strengthen decision-making for greater transparency and accountability. The National Treasury should integrate the public debt management system with the 2025 and submit a report within 15 days of implementation. Mr. Speaker, this suggests that the National Treasury has not integrated the public debt management system with IFMIS. And when IFMIS was being brought to this country, it was touted as the system that would solve all the problems. In fact, it is said to be the integrated financial management system, that it is dealing with all issues to do with government matters relating to finances. And it is very strange, Mr. Speaker, when you look at what is happening, that the public debt management system is out of the IFMIS. And I've said previously in my statement that the previous recommendation is that it is not fully automated. Some of the payments of the monies in terms of interest or the cost of the loans we've taken are not automated. So here you have non-automation. And then here we have, again, the public debt management system is not in the IFMIS. Is this by design, Mr. Speaker? Or can we just say it is human error? No, there's a problem there, Mr. Speaker. Someone must be benefiting. And these are the hideous characters. And I've many times said that treasury there, it needs to be drained. Because how do you explain that, Mr. Speaker? How do we have the IFMIS, entire system of government, integrated financial management system, and then the debt management system is outside that? Mr. Speaker, Senate, through this report, is telling the Republic of Kenya that there's a problem in that treasury. And there's something that is not right. And we are saying by 31st of May, this system of public debt management should be integrated, and a report must be brought here so that Kenyans can know what is truly happening. Mr. Speaker, there's also another issue of transparency here, and it is saying that to enhance transparency and accountability in the anticipated increase in domestic borrowing, the National Treasury should, within 60 days, establish a working committee to develop criteria for assessing the effective utilization of borrowed funds by ministries, department, and agency, MDS, and establish the registrar of government securities in accordance with Section 55 of the Public Finance Management Act. Mr. Speaker, many times, even during the campaigns, the question of accountability and clarity and transparency around our debt has been a very big political issue. Unfortunately, when we come into office, it goes quiet. Why, Mr. Speaker? I ask, why? So, Mr. Speaker, this working committee is supposed to develop the criteria for assessing what? The effective utilization of borrowed funds. Senator Faki has said that money is borrowed and then projects are not carried out because those borrowed funds have come, and then government of Kenya, the component is supposed to pay off persons affected by project, the PAPs. They have not paid them. So the borrowed funds are in the coffers, but the project is not being carried out, and Kenyans don't see the benefit of this money. Mr. Speaker, what this Senate is saying is that we need to have a working committee to establish a criteria for assessing the effective utilization of borrowed funds. And Mr. Speaker, this is another issue that has hurt a lot of some of our counties, because people go and borrow money. And when they bring this money, Mr. Speaker, they do mega projects. Unfortunately, there's no equity in how these borrowed funds are spread across this county. Mr. Speaker, yesterday somebody said here in the floor of the Senate that he was shocked to learn that monies were borrowed, and these monies, they were benefiting one county, which was supposed to be built, I don't know how many hospitals and health centers, while his county got zero. Mr. Speaker, borrowed funds, we need to have equity. Counties, in fact, when this money is come, when this working committee starts working, they should tell us how much money has, for example, Tana River benefited from these borrowed funds, Mr. Speaker. We don't need to run for president for us to benefit from borrowed funds, which all of us are paying taxes for, Mr. Speaker. This country needs to get out of this mentality that it is our time to eat. We must develop equity for the rest of our country. Mr. Speaker, I've just been looking at how the monies are being spread for these roads. You find our counties, a county like Tana River, we get almost nothing, while other counties are dominating the entire money. And those monies are borrowed funds, Mr. Speaker. So we are asking these working committees to be fair. They should they should actually publish. We should be honest in this country for us to heal the wounds that have created counties that are marginalized, like Tana River. We must start being honest. When we use this government of Kenya to go and collect money, and the debt we are all paying, all of us are paying, Mr. Speaker, the benefits of that debt must be spread across the counties, so that all of us, even when we are paying this generation, the next generation, we should be paying knowing that, okay, that $7 billion that was borrowed, we also benefited as a county on this percentage. Because those statistics are not there. We are just told the national debt is at 11.02 trillion. The debt of public stock and publicly guaranteed debt is at 11.0. But you are not told how much of this 11.03 trillion went to Tana River County. And this country needs to start being honest, Mr. Speaker. It must be fair to all of us. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, the one issue that this Senate has recommended is that there must be a debt register which will detail on the utilization of borrowed funds, including a specific breakdown of project financed through the proceeds of infrastructure bonds. Mr. Speaker, these recommendations are very deep. And I pray that colleague senators would see what I see, because timelines have been given for these recommendations to be activated and actioned. And Mr. Speaker, I pray that the Treasury, the Central Bank, and all those agencies that deal with matters finance will take the recommendation on this debt strategy management seriously in 2025, because for them it's like a normal thing. They don't see like it's a serious matter. People sit there, they just put us in debt, and then they are quickly telling us how bad the situation is. At every 100 shillings, We have to pay 70 shillings back for debt. Yes, we are paying that 70 shillings, but
Very well. Thank you, Senator Mungatana. Next is Senator Dr. Oburu Oginga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand up to make my contribution to this very, very important subject of debt management for our country. Mr. Speaker, I must from the onset admit that there is no country which does not have debt. All countries, including the richest countries, still borrow money. Mr. Speaker, it is not the question of borrowing. It is the question of management, managing the funds that you borrow. Mr. Speaker, in our country, or in our continent, Africa, most of the countries were classified by the developed world as HIPIC. And Mr. Speaker, HIPIC means highly indebted poor countries of the world. Mr. Speaker, our country, Kenya, used to belong to that group of classification. We were a highly indebted poor countries of the world. And because you are highly indebted and you are also poor, your risk, the risk of investing in you, the risk of giving you debt or giving you loans is very, very high. And therefore, the tendency generally in the financial world is to make that capital very, or that money borrowed very expensive, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you make it expensive for poor countries, the result is that they don't pay and they default in payment. And this is why the international financial arrangement was made in such a way that if you fall under the HIPIC, you would get cheaper loans on long term, and therefore when you get access to such loans, you don't access the commercial window in the international markets. Mr. Speaker, sir, our country moved out of that bracket of called HIPIC. And we were then classified as developing. Now, developing means we have access to the commercial window. That means we can borrow money from the commercial window. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very dangerous thing, because when you are upgraded to access the commercial window, then it means that you have to be very careful, because a lot of countries would like to give you money. They would like to give you money like the Eurobond, the what, but those are monies which are to be paid in very short periods of time, and these are people who are in a hurry to make money. Therefore, our negotiators, we have to train our people when they do financial negotiations with these people, because they are very smart and they have expertise, and a lot of expertise in negotiating some of these loans, Mr. Speaker. So you find that some of the loans are skewed, even though the policies were there. The policies which were there when I was there was, Mr. Speaker, sir, one of them was that any loan which does not contain a 35% grant within it was not touched by our government. Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether this policy is still there or not, but it was one of the things which was now making us difficult for many people who just want to make quick money to be running to the government to make that kind of quick money from that window. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other reason is that it makes it more difficult for you to negotiate the cheaper loans on long term with a longer grace period of negotiations, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, some of these people who give cheap loans, some of these multilateral institutions, they are very, very sensitive, Mr. Speaker. And there are a lot of projects in our country which are stalled, not for any other reason, but because of activism. Sometimes, I don't know, restriction. There's a lot of, when there is a lot of activism, for instance, if you query and there is an issue coming out that the people there have not been properly consulted on some issues, or even issues of what you call aesthetics. Somebody comes and claims that this project is being implemented on my land where I buried my grandfather, and I have such a great attachment to that grandfather that this project is actually interfering with the enjoyment of that right to have our grandfather's grave. That alone is enough to stop a project, and it takes more than a year to renegotiate and get that project back. I can give you an example. The Sondo Miriu project, there was just some activism. There are some people who wanted their voices to be heard. And when they raised it when the project was already on, and it took more than a year. The JICA funders who are funding that project in Japan took that matter to Japanese parliament and said not properly consulted. It took more than a year to renegotiate for them to come back. And that happens with World Bank projects. It happens with this. And I hope that some of these issues which sometimes occur are well taken care of by the implementers of these projects in our country, so that we don't get such delays in implementation. Because when you get delays in implementation, the interest keeps on accumulating. And even for that period when the project is stopped, the interest will continue to accumulate, and the taxpayers, the Kenyan taxpayers, will pay heavily for such incompetencies. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is very, very important that we look for alternative ways of development. We cannot concentrate on one way, which is just loans and raising the taxes. We can raise taxes. We can get loans, Mr. Speaker, but it might not be enough. There is a lot of money in the private hands. We need to tap that money in the private hands and use it for development, for the development of our country. It is being done in America. If you go there, you find big, big highways. They are all tall highways. They are tall highways, and these are built by private sector. And they developed systems of PPPs, public-private partnerships, long time. It took Kenya a very long time to develop policies which were acceptable to the private sector, to start utilizing the PPP principle. Mr. Speaker, it started here just about 10 or so years ago, And this is an area which I would have advise our people to use effectively in comparison to negotiating too much, raising our debt levels too high. Mr. Speaker, the PPPs in infrastructure of roads, infrastructure of water, infrastructure of electricity and energy generally is something which is very, very handy, particularly in developing countries like India. India has very, very effectively used the PPPs, and we should take that example. If in Kenya there was one which was not very transparent, the Senate took the lead, Honorable Nyonka took the lead here in fighting for the rights of Kenyans to know what is happening, because it was not all that transparent. But that is a lesson to us. It is not because the PPP is wrong. I don't think Honorable Nyonka was fighting against the PPP principle. He was fighting against the transparency in the implementation of the project, so that people know that they are getting value for their money, so that those who can also do the same thing are given opportunity to compete and participate in those projects. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I sincerely believe that if we go this way, if we develop this system, it will help us to reduce our debt level. And I also want to commend Honorable Ngatana. He stressed very much on the issue of keeping records and digitalizing management of debt. This is long, long overdue. And Mr. Speaker, this is something which was started long when I was still there. And I'm quite surprised, Mr. Speaker. There must be something, something somewhere. Why this has not been done fully up to today. That is the way to go. And there must be people there who are either benefiting or I don't know for what reason, that has not been digitalized fully up to now, and it is recommended in the report that should be done as by yesterday. It is something which should be completed, and it is not something we should continue arguing about. All the offices which have been mentioned are there, and it is their responsibility. Otherwise, the Senate, they are going to be implemented. Because in Kenya, we are used to having very, very good ideas. Very good ideas, better ideas than many countries around us. But many countries even steal our ideas and implement. There is a country here called Botswana. It is not a rich country. It only has some mineral like our country with 3/4 aridity. And Mr. Speaker, they have cattle, the same cattle like we have here. And they export of meat to countries which are nearer us here. And they have become so rich, Mr. Speaker, that they are actually funding the World Bank, and the World Bank gives us money. Because they have money which is kept, and it is called money for the future. It is not touched for recurrent expenditure. It is kept in an account where it is reinvested in other institutions, including the World Bank. And we have to do that our people don't bear big burdens when there are opportunities open to them. All that we need to do is to enable them so that they can earn money and do their own things, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to contribute more on this. I thank you for the opportunity, and hope that our report will be implemented and we shall be heard. And Mr. Speaker, there was a report here in Bunge some times ago when there was Elijah Mwangale on the JM Kariuki report, and he said there is a say in Kiluhia there, which says that the hyena was moving in the forest. He found a stone, and he told the stone, please hear me. The stone, please hear me. I'm talking to you, and I'm telling you to do the right thing. I'm telling the stone, even though you are quiet, but I'm sure you have heard.
Thank you for that story. Next is Senator Okechendi.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that we were supposed to go to the other side where probably there will be some stones. But I'm glad you have come to me, because I'm certainly not a stone. I've heard about what Senator Oburu has said, and I'm going to contribute more to what was said. And thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance, because, Mr. Speaker, midterm debt management strategy is the fundamental of budget making. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I don't know where we are losing the script as a house, to the extent that we can actually pass a BPS before we pass a midterm debt management strategy. Because a BPS gives us a focus of what the government wants to raise in the coming financial year. And it gives us a projection. For instance, this BPS for this year has given us a projection that's going to inform the finance bill that we want to raise about 4.3 trillion. But in that BPS, if you assess it, there is gaps on where we are going to raise this money. Where our ordinary revenue cannot be able to help us raise that money, then it fundamentally means that we have to borrow. And when we have to borrow, this is the suggestion that then comes with the midterm debt management strategy. So ordinarily, what we are passing here, Mr. Speaker, forms a foundation for passing the BPS, because it forms a foundation for which, as a House and as Parliament, we can be able to take control over the limits with which the government can then go and borrow. And Mr. Speaker, this is not just my wisdom or the wisdom of the committee. It is also the wisdom of our laws, Mr. Speaker. You know that the PFM Act, the PFM Act Section 33, and I think it is Cap 412A, requires that we must actually be able to look at medium-term debt management strategy so that we can be able to come up with a legal framework for which the government must think about sustainable way of raising money. And not just sustainable way of raising money, but also to look at the debt portfolio, Mr. Speaker, in such a way that that debt portfolio is actually going to inform what goes to the BPS and what doesn't go to the BPS, in terms of physical discipline of government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I dare say, and I'm not a prophet of doom, that if we continue this mismanagement between the MDTS and the BPS, Mr. Speaker, we might wake up in the next financial year with another Gen Z protest, because we are going to be forced to have a debt management strategy in the middle of a crisis, and then we're going to start talking about fiscal consolidation. Mr. Speaker, this is not something that we must take lightly as a parliament. And parliament must take control. You and I are children of debt. We are born out of debt, Mr. Speaker. We are born out of debt to the extent that there are two processes that are going on here. There's a debt that we were born into as a country that we must manage. And then there is constrained physical space that the government of the day must run the government, that then they must go into public borrowing, Mr. Speaker. If we don't participate in that process, Mr. Speaker, it becomes a problem. But I'm proud of this Senate, Mr. Speaker, because immediately when we came to this Senate, Mr. Speaker, we decided to review the PFM Act so that we could come up with what the sustainability in terms of our debt management looks like. And Mr. Speaker, remember, we passed a law in this House that directed the National Treasury that if you are going to be able to borrow, we must first of all look at our debt portfolio and make sure that the present value to GDP of our debt does not go beyond 55%. That's what we passed in this House, Mr. Speaker. But what has happened between June last year and today? Mr. Speaker, between June last year and today, our debt bumped to 10.58 trillion, which, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the present value to GDP ratio as per now, Mr. Speaker, we are at 63%. And Mr. Speaker, some theorists in the National Treasury might come and argue that it's not possible to actually achieve a 55% presence value to GDP ratio of our debt stock, Mr. Speaker, because of some numbers that they keep on bringing to this House in the BPS, Mr. Speaker, and they say that they're projecting that is a target that can only be met in 2028, 2029, Mr. Speaker. I am not persuaded with this, Mr. Speaker, because I am a student of Kibaki's free primary school education, Mr. Speaker. And during Kibaki's time, Mr. Speaker, I never even knew that I would even become anything close to a member of parliament in this country, Mr. Speaker. But at that time, Mr. Speaker, the present value to GDP ratio, Mr. Speaker, of our debt stock was at a whooping 2%. It was 2%, Mr. Speaker, meaning that there's something that has become rogue in this country, where the debt of this country, Mr. Speaker, is not spent on development. The debt of this country, Mr. Speaker, is spent in the mouth of individuals. It is spent in the mouth of people in power, Mr. Speaker, so that the money that we are borrowing, Mr. Speaker, never get anything done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how comes that in a BPS that is being proposed now, we are proposing to raise a variety of money, Mr. Speaker, to 4.3 trillion, and then, Mr. Speaker, we want to burden the country again, that out of that 4.3 trillion, Mr. Speaker, the cost of our debt, that means that the money that we'll be paying out of that money raised, Mr. Speaker, is going to be 1.97 trillion. That means basically, if you round off that number, we are going to be paying 2 trillion. We raised 4.3 trillion, Mr. Speaker, to pay 2 trillion in debt, Mr. Speaker. Are we slaves in our own country? And are we fine being slaves in our own country, Mr. Speaker? When we have got a PFM, Mr. Speaker, that has actually guided us, that in structuring our debt in this country, Mr. Speaker, we must also be able to look at how do we make our domestic debt market, sustainable, Mr. Speaker. The same way Honorable Senator Mungatana has indicated that our domestic market, Mr. Speaker, is currently depressed. It is bleeding. It is hemorrhaging, Mr. Speaker. The domestic debt market is completely unsustainable, Mr. Speaker. Last year, Mr. Speaker, I was the same Finance and Budget Committee when we did propose that the only reason why we'll pass a BPS in this House is if the Treasury will help the country go to a 50%, 50-50 situation whereby the domestic debt will be 50% and the foreign market will be the external market, Mr. Speaker, will take the other 50%. What happened, Mr. Speaker? On the report that we have had now, Mr. Speaker, we have 30-70. 30% external, 70% domestic. Then that can be able to allow that we don't face crowding out of our businesses, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, what happens is the government has realized that the domestic market, despite the fact that it's the most expensive compared to the external market, Mr. Speaker, it is a very easy capital to come by. It's a very easy capital to get your hands into. And it's a very easy money to come from Equity Bank or to come from KCB or to come from Family Bank and then go to Central Bank and it gets lost somewhere, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how is this possible? If you are coming here, Mr. Speaker, with a proposal because if you look at the report that we have here, Mr. Speaker, we are being told as a parliament that we be comfortable that our gross, let me just get it, Mr. Speaker, because I don't want to say things that don't exist, because this is what has been proposed here, Mr. Speaker, that we be comfortable with a gross financing of a ratio of 25 to 75. That means that 25 is going to the external market and 75 to the domestic borrowing market. Mr. Speaker, last year we said that that gross borrowing must be 50%. How is it being proposed that now it has to be 75%? And Mr. Speaker, if you go to the net borrowing, the net financing strategy is 35 to 65%. Meaning that where Parliament has become comfortable in terms of becoming a rubber stamp in this process, because that's what we have become. We are a mere rubber stamp in this process of budget making, Mr. Speaker. Where we have become comfortable that we are a rubber stamp, the executive also becomes comfortable that, wait a minute, we can increase this domestic debt borrowing. Because it's easy money, it's quick money to get. We can just keep on increasing it, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, when you increase this domestic public borrowing, Mr. Speaker, what you are doing is that today you are killing Keroche breweries. Today, Mr. Speaker, it's not possible for Keroche to borrow and compete with government, because the government borrowing is going to be lucrative for the commercial banks as possible, Mr. Speaker. Today you are killing Bata. Today you are killing Safaricom. Today you are choosing to kill all the business that I see thriving in this economy, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we have actually seen a number of our businesses closing down because out of this borrowing, and you want to raise a bigger deficit of about 900 billion, Mr. Speaker, which again has increased from 700 billion last year. What you're doing also is that as you increase the cost of borrowing in this country, Mr. Speaker, and the risk associated with it in the domestic market, what you're also doing, you are increasing taxes on these businesses. You are increasing taxes on these businesses, Mr. Speaker. The corporate tax, the income tax, and all the taxes that are going on in this country, Mr. Speaker, are making it virtually impossible even to think about a startup nation, Mr. Speaker. Businesses that could easily attract $500 million, Mr. Speaker, cannot get those monies in our economy today. Reason being, the structure of debt is not possible to get money to finance them in our economy. Our economy also, if it comes to startup market, Mr. Speaker, we don't have a thriving venture capitalist who can be able to actually backstop this idea of lack of credit in our commercial business, Mr. Speaker. Once you have credit, Mr. Speaker, if you're in the U.S., I know people are arguing that there is no country that doesn't borrow. Yes, even the U.S. borrows. That is true. The U.S. has got debt. China borrows. Other countries borrow. But the first thing, Mr. Speaker, is that when they borrow on their currency. So that the U.S. is comfortable with their debt. If the worst will happen, the U.S. will simply print their money and be able to pay. But us, when we borrow, we peg it to the dollar, Mr. Speaker. When we peg it to the dollar, any adjustments in the global market, Mr. Speaker, do affect us. Any adjustment in the global market economy, Mr. Speaker, do affect us. So our debt will continue piling and piling, Mr. Speaker, to the extent that if we approve what the Treasury is asking us to approve without juxtaposing it with the BPS, Mr. Speaker, what will happen is that by June of this year, Mr. Speaker, we will have a debt stock of 11.07 trillion. Mr. Speaker, you haven't even paid what you're born of. And I can see you, Mr. Speaker, when I look at you, you already have gray hair, Mr. Speaker. And you haven't paid the debt that you were born and found. Yet, in another 3 months, your debt stock as a country is going to 11.07 trillion, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, let me remind you that even this number is not factual. It's not a number that you can be comfortable defending. This is a number that we are given by the Treasury to defend its proposed ratio for borrowing, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Eddie Okech, what is the relationship between gray hair and the debt management?
That's a good question, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the relationship is very simple. Since you are born up to now, you are almost going towards your old age, Mr. Speaker. You have been paying a lot of debt in this country that you don't understand, haven't helped you. And Mr. Speaker, I see you working very hard. Every day you are in this house, Mr. Speaker, to work for the nation. You are earning meager income, Mr. Speaker, which again, 50% of it must go to pay debt. And now I'm imagining, what will your children remain with? You have worked as a donkey for this country and you have paid everything. But now, what is going to happen to your children when you wake up in June and they have got 11.07 trillion worth of debt? This is what I'm crying, Mr. Speaker. I'm sympathizing with you. I'm empathizing with you, Mr. Speaker. And I hope that as a House, you will see how serious this thing is affecting us to the extent that we must take control over the debt management process, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, one thing that we must also insist in as a House, Mr. Speaker, the next time the National Treasury comes here, before we consider the BPS, Mr. Speaker, they must give us a scientific rationale of where they are coming up with these debt numbers, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, these debt numbers, if you go to the National Treasury, Mr. Speaker, they have got a different figure from the control of budget. They have got a different figure from the Auditor General. They have got a different figure from the Central Bank. Who is telling us the truth, Mr. Speaker? And as I've told you, that entire debt stock, Mr. Speaker, when it was borrowed, you were not explained to what it was going to do. When it's now being consumed, you are not told what it was going to do, Mr. Speaker. I remember in the former regime, Mr. Speaker, when there was a deficit of about 500 billion, Mr. Speaker. When it came, and from the Auditor General reports, Mr. Speaker, when you followed the 500 billion, Mr. Speaker, it was committed to infrastructure in one region, Mr. Speaker. How do you borrow 500 billion and then commit it in one region on infrastructure, Mr. Speaker? How is it fair? And that concern of that infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, Migori, where I come from, does not consume that infrastructure. I empathize with the Senator of Kisii because he's always the most vocal about debt issues. Where he comes from, I did not see that money working in Kisii, Mr. Speaker. I didn't see that money in Turkana, Mr. Speaker. I didn't see that money in Mandera, Mr. Speaker. Yet the child from Mandera, Mr. Speaker, even Mr. Speaker, in where you come from in Meru, I looked at those numbers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I didn't see that money in Meru. It was not there, 500 billion. And Mr. Speaker, today, when it comes to paying it, all of us must participate. And not just participate, it is equal distribution, Mr. Speaker. I pay the same amount of debt as the person from Tana River, Mr. Speaker, who when you go, Mr. Speaker, they are laboring in backbreaking dust every single day, riding borders to make a living, Mr. Speaker. Then out of that dust, they must then pay tax, Mr. Speaker. Out of that tax, Mr. Speaker, they must pay equal amount of money as other regions that have benefited from this debt, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we must take control. We must not leave this debt management conversation to the Treasury, Mr. Speaker. We must take full control, and I'm very proud of our members of the Finance and Budget because they have been very engaged, and Mr. Speaker, you have seen them staying in this house as much as they can to be able to contribute in this house. I've seen Senator Ali Roba, Mr. Speaker, the chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, staying in this house till late hours, Mr. Speaker, to give you a snippet of what is happening in this country, Mr. Speaker. I've seen the Vice Chair, Madam and Senator Tabitha, Mr. Speaker, staying in this house till late hours, Mr. Speaker, so that she can give you just an idea of what we are struggling with in the Finance and Budget Committee, Mr. Speaker, to make sense to the CS of Finance, Mr. Speaker. I have seen Senator Boni Aluale staying in this house, Mr. Speaker, to give you just an idea of why we must manage this debt so that my fellow countrymen, people from Kuria, people from Masangora in Kuria, Mr. Speaker, people from Isibania in Kuria, people from Komosoko Nyamosenza in Kuria, Mr. Speaker, people from Makalda, who do not understand this burden, why it must come to them, Mr. Speaker, can get reprieve. And Mr. Speaker, I hope that even as we pass this MDDS, Mr. Speaker, the recommendation that have been forwarded by this amazing Finance and Budget Committee, Mr. Speaker, will not go to vain, Mr. Speaker. We will not be confronted with the next MDTS, Mr. Speaker, that is brought to us on the basis of our recommendations that were never adhered to, Mr. Speaker. We cannot recommend that you go down on domestic borrowing, Mr. Speaker, We cannot recommend that the government goes down on, fiscal deficit that they have to bring it down, Mr. Speaker. Then the next year we are confronted with an increased fiscal deficit. Then we are confronted with an increased borrowing domestically, without the Parliament having known that increased under our watch, Mr. Speaker. That must stop, as I support the Finance and Budget Committee, Mr. Speaker, for coming with this, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this particular motion. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well spoken. Senator Onyong Kalichan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to really commend my colleagues who have really articulated this issue as openly and as sincerely as we've been talking about it. I want to thank Honorable Buru Odinga for acknowledging that even when the model of PPP has been accepted as the modus operandi of how we are going to run our projects in terms of investments and all that we are supposed to do, that even when the PPP issue has been a hot topic in Kenya, that, Mr. Speaker, my hope and wish is that, yes, let us adopt the PPP model, but let us make sure that we are transparent, accountable, fair, and equitable in trying to distribute the resources of our country. Number two, I want to thank my colleague, my young Senator Eddie Okech, one of the very able individuals in this House who has contributed quite a bit, and I sit with him in the Finance Committee, and I'm proud of him, and I'm happy the issues he has raised are quite substantive, and many people may not see them. My leader, my friend, my brother, Honorable Okiya Omtata, Kenya will vindicate you. You have consistently raised these issues even before I came to the Senate. Some of us did not understand the weightiness and the importance of raising this issue. Senator Omtata, thank you for noticing that we need to separate the central bank and the Treasury from the executive. That is, in fact, one of the challenges that we are going to face as a committee, and we are going to interrogate this. I also want to give credit to my brother, Honorable Mungatana. Thank you, sir. Your experience and time enables you to analyze these issues passionately. I believe that what you have discussed will make Kenya a better place. Mr. Speaker, the public debt management issue in our country is at a crisis level. The reason why I say this is because, Mr. Speaker, we have been looking, analyzing, discussing what is the cost of our debt? Why do we borrow so much money? Why is it that we, in the last 10 years, close to 12 years, we've actually increased our debt by 100%? When President Kibaki was President of the Republic of Kenya, our debt was, by the time he was leaving, 1.1 trillion shillings. After that period, and you look at where we are right now, our debt is close to 12 trillion. And the question that you ask when you sit in this House, what is it that we need to do to make sure that this exercise, which I personally call an exercise in futility, where we are borrowing excessively, where in fact we are borrowing domestically, Mr. Speaker, where the interest rates at which we are borrowing government money, state funds, you are now at about, some of the banks are giving us money at 12%, 16%. I am told one of the loans was borrowed at 18%. And yet, Mr. Speaker, you know that we can borrow money globally at the cost of 2%. We can actually reschedule Kenya's debts. All of them. All of them, all our debts can be rescheduled. We can go to the international money market. We can borrow. We can borrow at interest rates between 2 and 4%. And we can pay out all our debt stock of debt and make sure we begin afresh. These are the issues that I would want the committee to look at, and I would want this House to look at. Number two, Mr. Speaker, there was a basic operating standard procedure on how we used our borrowed money. What did we do, Mr. Speaker? The money would come. Normally, the rates at which we borrowed was at 30-70. Like Senator Edia said, domestically, we would borrow at 30% because when you borrow domestically, then for the ordinary business person or the ordinary Kenyan, borrowing in commercial banks becomes more expensive, and the banks do not want to lend to ordinary business people. Why? Because of the cost of risk. The risk of where a commercial enterprise might borrow money and not deliver. So what happens is that commercial banks prefer when bills, bonds, and stocks is what they trade in, and the government is very comfortable with that. Why? I'm sure my brother Eddie and many other leaders here have talked about it. When you go and negotiate with a commercial bank and you are borrowing 1 trillion shillings, and this commercial bank is actually giving you this money at a certain percentage, information and data gets to us where people in government will go and negotiate with some of these commercial banks, and they will even enable these commercial banks, after they've borrowed money for the government, to allow the commercial bank to do overnight lending, where interest rates are delivered, are earned, and we never discussed these issues openly until recently when Okiya Omtata started discussing it. Why do we borrow? Mr. Speaker, we borrow because sometimes our budget has got gaps. Previously, the Kenyan government position, if you look at when Saitoti was the Minister for Finance, come up to President Kibaki and move on, you will realize that we were borrowing when we would need a stopgap measure where we would borrow most probably 5% or whatever the balance was, and then our budget would be balanced, and we would keep on moving as the economy was growing. What happened? Now we borrow for big projects. We borrow for those projects where billions and billions, not Kenyan shillings, billions and billions, Mr. Speaker, of American dollar funding is what we are dealing with. As a result, the money that was supposed to deal with the basic issues of our governance, basic issues of our very existence. How do we handle the health sector? How we are handling our education? How are we handling our agriculture? The very basic sectors of our economy that are meant to deliver for the Kenyan public. We then decide, no, we are going to take this money and do these big-time projects. Why? Because the big-time projects is where we get our kickbacks. That is where we generate our revenue by arguing and saying, no. You don't have to spend any money in farming. Look for something big that you can do, so that then that is where the money is shared, and that is where we really don't even have to work very hard about this. Why? Because even if we borrow, we'll be able to pay this money anyway. The problem we have, soon, we are not going to be able to pay this money because we are at 68%. If by next year we are going to borrow another 1.2 trillion like we did last year, the reality is soon we are going to be at 90%, and then after that, Kenya will just become like Thailand. We will not pay our debts back. We will not be able to pay salaries. The economy will just become an economy. It will become a supermarket. Essentially, what does a supermarket do? We become consumers. Then you don't have to worry about agricultural development and growth. You don't have to worry about your health sector. In fact, we as a people will then now begin thinking about, are we taking our patients to Rwanda, which is a country that is operating their health facilities better than ours? Or are we going to educate our children in Rwanda, where the kids are going to school achieving the grades they want? The educational sector is actually teaching mathematics. And what do we do in our country? We are now saying we don't even have to allow kids to learn maths. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a passionate plea to my colleagues in this House. The responsibility of fixing the mess we are in falls particularly on this House. Our country has a problem. We are not able to transform this country from a low-level, middle, low-income developing country into a mid-level, upper-level developing country. We are slowly going to go back to where we used to be, an underdeveloped country. A country that depends on its revenues so that it can govern itself on a daily basis. We are not going to be a country that invests on those sectors that are going to change the livelihoods of our people. We are not a country that is willing to tackle the issues that are important. We must make the central bank to be independent. We must make the treasury to become advisory, so that the treasury's responsibility is to advise the president on what the economic issues are on a micro basis and on a macro basis. What do we do with interest rates? What are we doing with investments and savings? Why is investment in Kenya becoming a problem? Why are countries moving out? Because once companies move out of your country and they go and invest somewhere, then you have lesser of your people getting jobs, then you have lesser of your people generating revenue for themselves, and you have lesser of the government taking taxes, and you cannot continue taxing people indefinitely. Mr. Speaker, many of my colleagues have brought wonderful issues in this place. In this house, I am so happy with what is being discussed. We must make sure that we are able to make sure that the public debt management system is linked to the IFMI system. It is also linked to the own source revenue systems. How can you have a financial platform in your country that only deliberately has been cut into sections and bits and pieces because it makes it easier for those who are cutting deals and making money out of these state resources to do it without it looking seamless? And yet in reality, we are not seamlessly managing our debt and revenues, and yet we are seamlessly managing the stealing of those revenues and the resources. Mr. Speaker, I would like to insist that yes, the automation must be done on even how the withdrawals of payments for the repayment of the debts that we have. And yes, like Senator Eddie Okech has said, why don't we know what the debt stock in our republic is? You have the Auditor General giving you a different figure. You have the Controller of Budget giving you a different figure. You have the Budget Committee, the Finance Committee, when we were sitting the other day, the figure we are having of 12 trillion. I believe that our debt right now is at about 14 trillion. Can we get this committee, the Finance Committee, and this House to make sure that all those 4 institutions are called and we are able to, even if it means, Madam Speaker, we are able to get a forensic audit to be done so that historically we can even know how much money we borrowed, where did the money go, who spent that money, all the Eurobonds we have gotten, how much money has been used to pay debt as we speak. And you know what is very interesting, Madam Speaker? Even when we are paying the debts, our debt never goes down. How can you pay 800 billion of debt every year, and yet the debt which you have of 12 trillion never goes down? It means the debts are actually not being paid. It means money is being siphoned off from the international money market, and we are told that this was collected so that we can go and pay our debts, and yet in reality, Madam Speaker, what actually happens is that this money cannot be accounted for by any of our institutions that we have set up to guard what is happening in our country in terms of financial management. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to really plead with the committee and members of this House, and I can see we are now slowly beginning to have a critical mass. Let us make sure that we know how much we are borrowing. Let us make sure we know where the money goes. Let us make sure what we can do. Let us, in the process of achieving this, let us make sure that whatever money that we borrow is utilized fairly, equitably amongst all our counties. And let us make sure, Madam Speaker, that Kenyans begin to trust government. If we don't have an open government, even if the head of state sings from morning till evening, begging Kenyans to raise taxes for him, they will refuse. Why? Because they feel that we are not being open enough and we are not telling them the truth as to what is happening to their money and what is happening to the money that is borrowed for development for our country. Madam Speaker, I would like to say another issue. I have watched what is happening in our country, and I've seen this for quite a long time. And the reason is I've been around for a while. Unless we change the way we behave, unless we change the strategies that we use, unless we change the socio-political, economic behavior as leadership, we are taking our country in the wrong direction. Why do I say so? We have a country. You expect what runs the economy of this country is the private sector. The private sector, the small businesses, the big businesses, the mix between MDGs, all these groups, when you put them together, that is the engine that is supposed to drive our economy. But you see, Madam Speaker, right now in Kenya, our economy is being driven by the national government. That is why everybody wants business in government. That is why everybody wants to do deals in government. That is why any transaction you see, everybody would want to own a piece of land owned by government. Everybody would want to have. Every single transaction we are conducting today is actually about government. How I plead with my colleagues here that we change that to the point where we agree that the private sector is going to be the driver, is going to be the engine that is going to change the country, the direction it's going. That we have an economy that grows, the cake becomes bigger, we are responsible how we use our donor funds, we are responsible how we use all the money that we borrow, and we are responsible how we use the taxes that we collect from Kenyans. And Madam Speaker, my honest observation and honest feeling is that we are failing on all those gaps. And therefore, I would like to say that what works, let us follow it up. Let us make sure that our GDP ratio to debt and to borrowing should come down to 50-50. And let us make sure that when we borrow funds, we borrow externally, because money is cheaper at the international money market. We can go 70-30 as we have always been. And I had Honorable Buru Odinga mention, and it's true because of the institutional memory. He was in the treasury. There was a time when the Kenyan government borrowed any money, Madam Speaker. 30% of that money was grants. 70% is what we paid. And the loans were concessional, the loans were long-term, the loans were very soft. That is how you change and develop the development areas in our sectors. Madam Speaker, I would like to finally say that there has been this argument historically, which started about 10 years ago, that all the money we get, whether we borrow it or domestically, what we want to do is make sure that we actually use this money to do mega projects, where you want to spend 500 billion, where you want to spend 150 billion. Madam Speaker, Kenya just needs for us to fix the health sector, fix the education sector, make sure that we fix the basic roads. Basic roads. Make sure that there is an ease to do business. Make sure that the Kenyan public appreciates that our education is running well, that we are funding university students well, that the primary school must. Why can't we give free education, Madam Speaker, to our poor people in this country? Why? Because Kibaki did it. He was using 72 billion to take primary, secondary, and university students for free education. Right now, the Ministry of Education is given 640 billion shillings. And we can't give our children free education? And we borrow this money? We are spending 640 billion shillings for the education sector. And we are not able to give free education to our students. And you hear all these things about who prints books, where the money is going. I mean, Madam Speaker, for us to fix our country, yes, this House can come up with the recommendation. But unless we have structures and institutions that are going, Honorable Mtata, you notice every single time in our republic, at least, I'm so happy it's been like nearly a week that you have not seen a scandal. There is scandal after scandal after scandal about public money. Can we stop the abuse, the misuse, the wastage of public funds so that we serve the Kenyan public with the dignity they deserve so that we can leave the country that is better than we found it. And my worry is many of us may not see the contradiction of where we are. We are a country that has got a budget that can run between 6 to 7 countries within the East and Central African region. What we have as a budget can run those 7 countries. But if you take the population we have of 50 million, all these countries I'm mentioning, there are 6 or 7, their population is 300 million. How come we are not able to use the resources that we have to fix the mess we are in? And that is why I keep saying, we don't need to borrow. The money we have, in fact, is enough. All right? Why is the money not enough? We keep on having ghost workers. We employ teachers. We don't know who owns the...
Time up, Senator. Thank you. Okay, half a minute, you finish the sentence.
Yes. I just wanted to say, let us make sure there is open government, transparent government, where we are accountable to each other, where we manage the resources of our country with prudence and respect, and Kenyans will be always happy that we were in this house. And I really hope that this house, and particularly this house and the Budget Committee, will stand up and stand for the Kenyans. Madam Speaker, thank you. With all those many remarks, I second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Okoitandru Mutata, Busia County.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this very important debate. I will begin by referring to the Constitution, which is my Bible or my Quran on matters governance. Article 220 of the Constitution provides for how our budgets have to be made, their content, timing, and form. And within that particular section, it's clearly stated that our debts must be contained in the budgets, in the annual budgets that are made. The proposals to borrow and where money is to be borrowed from should be in the budget that comes to the Parliament every year. Now, contrary to that, Parliament has done something very strange and totally unconstitutional in this country by enacting something called the debt ceiling in the Public Finance Management Act. The debt ceiling, the concept of a debt ceiling has got a history. Before 1917, in the USA, Congress used to approve every debt that was borrowed by the Treasury for the executive in America, in the USA. In 2017, when the USA joined the First World War, Congress began the idea of allowing the Treasury to borrow on a need. And that morphed into the culture where they began the so-called debt ceiling in an attempt to contain the appetite for money by the executive. And up to now, you even have the Debt Act that was passed under Obama trying to address these issues. They have not done very well. So we have gone ahead and borrowed the idea of a debt ceiling from the Americans who did it out of an emergency situation and failed to go back to the default that they used to have, where Congress approved every debt. And now we are trying to peg our debt on GDP. First of all, it doesn't make any sense, any common sense, to peg a debt on GDP when you know that GDP is the collective, the totality of the productivity of a state as estimated per year. And yet you repay debt, not from your percentage of GDP, you repay debt from your taxes. Debt must be tied to the capacity to raise taxes to pay them. And that's why in Article 220, there is a requirement that Parliament, in every budget that the executive proposes, in Article 221C, it says, 1B, first of all, it says, budgets of the national and county governments shall contain proposals for financing any anticipated deficit for the period to which they apply. C, proposals regarding borrowing and other forms of public liability that will increase public debt during the following year. Now, when you look at our budget, Parliament always passes a balanced budget that conforms to those two provisions. That budget is contained in the appropriation bill. And each appropriation bill is what gives us the legitimate debt within the Republic of Kenya. Now, I've taken my time to examine our appropriation bills from 2017 to 2025 and established that Parliament only approved 2 trillion, has only approved 2 trillion 791 billion 543 million 336,707 shillings. Yet, when you examine the debt register published by the Treasury, you find that we have borrowed 8 trillion 918 billion 21 million 659,782 shillings, which means we have borrowed 6 trillion 950,163 billion 6 trillion 950 billion 163 million 132,328 shillings outside the law. Other than that, we have also seen the other activity that happened the other day. We were told that the Eurobond had matured and the government required to borrow extra money from the Eurobond market to offset what had become due. And they borrowed quite a bit of money. Yet, the Constitution in Article 214 states categorically that the public debt is a direct charge on the consolidated fund. The Public Finance Management Act 2 and the regulations forbid borrowing money to pay another debt, borrowing money to pay a debt. So why does the government get powers to do these kind of things? And I'm in particular referring to Section 15, 2C, and 50 clause 3 of the Public Finance Management Act. When we borrow money against the law, what are we trying to achieve? What evidence is there that the debt for the Eurobond had not been paid off as required by law automatically as a direct charge to the consolidated fund, that we had to go borrowing further money for it? Madam Speaker, as I proceed to submit, I also want to observe that of the odious debt that I've referred to, 4 trillion 605 billion 840 million 287,992 shillings was incurred in the period 2014 to 2022 when President Uhuru Kenyatta was in charge. Under President Ruto, That's from 2022 when he took over. Already 2 trillion, 250 billion, 325 million, 905,200 shillings has been taken outside the law. We have a program-based budgeting process whereby when money is borrowed, it's tied to a project. These trillions of shillings, more than 6 trillion, cannot be traced in government documents. I've taken my time from October last year, poring over thousands of documents that I got from the websites of the Treasury, Central Bank, Control of Budget, and all these people. And I cannot trace where this money went. I can see why the 2-point-something trillion that the Parliament approved is clearly seen where it went. This money cannot be traced in the economy. To make matters worse, Madam Speaker, not a single domestic debt is approved by Parliament. Not a single one. All those billions. Look at the Appropriation Act. There's none. It's somehow that the executive does not implement the budget. Because when you look at the statement of annual revenue and actual revenue and net expenditure, which is published monthly, at the end of every month, the statement of actual revenue and net expenditure. That's why you encounter this animal called the domestic debt. If you look at the budget, there's no domestic debt. Treasury bonds, treasury bills are a legitimate form of, treasury bills are supposed to act like an overdraft. Where there's a delay by the treasury, by the KRA to submit enough money to government, the government should issue treasury bills to fill up the gap, but the treasury bills by law must be paid within 12 months. They cannot become a debt. Now, under the Public Finance Management Act, all borrowing must support a capital project, a development project which is defined. But you find that we are borrowing a lot of money on the domestic market without approval of Parliament. Where does this money go when it is not even budgeted for? Why are we borrowing this money? And it's running in billions of shillings. Madam Speaker, I wish our screens were working. I would have beamed my calculations onto that screen so that Kenyans can see how they are being scammed in the name of taking public debt. I've done a graph, and you realize one of the interesting things is that our debt spikes every time we have got a handshake, which means that the mechanisms of oversight are lost. In every year when you have had a handshake, there's been a spike in reckless borrowing and reckless expenditure by government. I hope it doesn't happen today. It's just unfortunate that we cannot, I don't know whether we are allowed or not, but I would have loved to be projecting some of these figures on these screens that we have here, so that all Kenyans can see exactly how we are being messed up, how we are being hurt. And another painful thing is that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which is all over demanding more powers and all that out of you, has never audited our debt portfolio. I don't understand why they cannot just let the police, the economic crimes unit of the CID, do their work. The ESCC has never audited our debt. You find the government amended the Public Finance Management Act to allow for money borrowed to be kept offshore, contrary to Article 206, which requires that all money borrowed must be kept in the consolidated fund. So they amended that, and at the discretion of the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, they can borrow money and keep offshore. And that's one of the things that is really affecting us. When you look at the total amount of debt that we have borrowed, many people discuss it in terms of the actual figures borrowed. But if you factor in, Madam Speaker, you factor in the cost of the loans, and you factor in the interest on the loans, you get a shocking figure. Right now, we are standing at 18 trillion shillings when you take those factors in. Totally unsustainable for us. And I think in the last payment I've seen in this statement, and the projections of paying 1.7 trillion, 2.7 trillion in debt and what have you, those kind of projections are not good for this country. They are existential threats to this country. You cannot have a budget of, say, 3.7 trillion and spend 1.7 trillion repaying debt, and only 700 billion of the 1.7 trillion goes to paying off the principal, and 1 trillion goes to paying interest. That cannot work. It's going to sink this country. Another issue, Madam Speaker, that I would like to speak to is another form of debt that is not necessarily public debt, but it's a debt to the public in the name of pending bills. Pending bills, Madam Speaker, are a major scam. And the scam masters have convinced everybody in this country that we abandon cash-based accounting, we go to accrual accounting. Arrant nonsense. How do you do that? When you implement a budget, and a budget is an act of parliament, a budget is a law, or a budget is an act of a county assembly, it's a law. How do you accrue from one law to another law without referring back to parliament? How do you carry a debt from year 1 to year 2, when year 1, parliament said, or the National County Assembly said, we are giving you this budget, we are giving you this power to collect funds, you should deal with that case. And you have been given the capacity to do an appropriation bill, an appropriation a supplementary budget, where emergencies occur that you may not have foreseen. So this drive that we are going to go to accrual accounting, when governments are run on a cash basis, special hours, and it's anchored in the Constitution, is another monster that is going to eat up this country. And we need to look it in the face and say, how do you achieve that? Because the people from this PAC or whatever, these accountants, have come and they are hollering all over that that's what happens in the private sector. Who tells them that you can run a government like a private sector account? We implement budgets, which are laws. So I don't see a mechanism of accruing an issue from one budget to another budget without going back to parliament. I know that dispensations, there are countries which run on accrual basis. But it's not in their law. It's not in their constitution. A unique feature of Kenya's constitution that we have got chapter 12 on public finance, which tries to cure mischief that has happened in this country since independence, whereby public coffers have never been respected. That's why we have that purely technical chapter in our constitution prescribing what should be done. So when we move away from that and say, so-and-so does it, so-and-so does it, so-and-so, the majority are doing it, but what is in their constitution? Is it like ours? Why did we put in our constitution? What are we trying to cure? So, Madam Speaker, I pray that this House, and I'm aware that this House even made some very grievous decision, it passed a motion saying that pending bills will be a first charge on the county revenue fund. And the logic, they said, okay, Article 14 of the 214 of the Constitution, Article 214 of the Constitution justifies or states that a public debt is a first charge on the consolidated fund. But they read 214 part 1. They did not read part 2, which then defines what is a public debt. Part 2 of 214 defines a public debt to be loans, guarantees for loans, and expenses incurred and related matters to loans. A pending bill where a county government has taken MCAs on a baseline study and they incur money and they can't pay, how does that become a public debt? Or you have contracted somebody to build a road and you don't pay him, you divert money to pay somebody else. How does that become a public debt? How does that become a first charge on the county revenue fund? Madam Speaker, we need to get serious, and I'm requesting that this parliament sets up induction courses for members of parliament on the Constitution of Kenya, and especially on Chapter 12, so that we can fully comprehend as a House what the architecture for handling public finances is, and then going forward, we'll be able to engage effectively and according to the book. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity, and I don't support the recommendations made because they're unconstitutional. But I know I might be the only voice, but it doesn't matter when I'm the only voice. I don't support them. They are totally unconstitutional, and they should go back and have a reference to the Constitution. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Okoito Omutata. Senator Matthew John Muhia, Nyandarua County.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And I want to encourage Senator Omtata, Senator Andrew Okia Omtata. You're not the only voice, because you are a voice that, just like Elijah Mwangale, the stone, it is your work to tell the stone. Whether the stone wants to listen, it is up to the stone. But you're not the only voice on this particular matter, especially on the recommendations that have been made by the Committee on Finance. I think I'm with you. I will not say that I support the recommendations that have been made by the Committee on Finance. More specifically, because I see them as a tap on the list of the government. They are just very moderate in terms of the recommendations that have been made on such a serious breach of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya. They never want to go for the jugular. They don't want to say, and as it is, Honorable Speaker, so therefore, Honorable Omtata, feel encouraged. It feels good to do the right thing. We have always been hand-tied in the past, and you know. But we feel good. If this is how you've been feeling for the time that you've been speaking freely, we feel very good that you are now able to speak very freely without any baggage of being threatened by anybody, that if you say this, this will happen. If you don't say this, that will happen. So we are now able to speak very freely. Honorable Speaker, we are staring at an extremely difficult and an extremely dangerous situation as a country, Honorable Speaker. And in fact, what we are staring at is a threat on the sovereignty of the Republic of Kenya. Because, Honorable Speaker, when our debt has grown to 11.2 trillion, regardless of the route, as has been spoken about by Senator Omtata, regardless of the route that you've used to arrive to 11.02 trillion of our national debt, Honorable Speaker, and looking at the amount of money that we as a country are expected to pay to service our debt, then it tells you that the sovereignty of this republic is actually at very, very great risk. And the actions that have been made and the actions that have been, the very deliberate actions that have been taken and steps that have been taken by the William Ruto administration, Honorable Speaker, they are putting this country in a hole that it will be extremely difficult for us to get out of this particular hole, Honorable Speaker. And let me say this, looking at all the recommendations and all the submissions that have been made by every person who actually, I've seen that there were like 7 or so bodies that gave the recommendations on this particular report, Honorable Speaker. None of them has rounded President William Ruto, because every one of us, including the members of that particular committee, they know that we are actually, or the country is not on the right trajectory. If by June 2025, Honorable Speaker, which is this year, by June of this year, our public public debt service will be at, standing at 1.95 trillion, that would be almost half of the national budget, Honorable Speaker. Because if our budget for the next year will be standing at 4 trillion, Honorable Speaker, and we are spending 1.95 on our on servicing our national debt, Honorable Speaker, it tells you that for almost every 1 shilling that is collected, half of that money will be used for loans, Honorable Speaker. And the Senator Mtata has told you that, especially for the external loans that we get, they are meant or they are supposed to go to capital projects. I would also ask, like Senator Onyonka has asked, what is this hole that never fills, Honorable Speaker? If every year we are paying 1.95 trillion, how comes our national debt does not reduce? And we also would want to put to test, because part of the campaign promises by President William Ruto, he was saying, and if I was to quote him, watu wamekopa pesa wamekula pesa hii Kenya, watu wamekuwa wakikopa pesa wanapeleka mahali ingine, tukichukua hii serikali hatutakuwa tunakopa, serikali yetu tutaweka sawa sawa na tutarokota kodi. Lakini we need to put that statement to test, Honorable Speaker. In his first year, President Uhuru Kenyatta, since he was sworn in 2013 to 2014, September of 2013 to September of 2014, Uhuru Kenyatta had a debt, or had accumulated a debt of 437 billion. What about our angel who was supposed to correct that particular problem? President William Ruto had accumulated a debt of, in his first 9 months, in his first 1 year, sorry, he had accumulated a debt of 1.2 trillion. And Honorable Speaker, we then need to ask ourselves, because we are not borrowing this money to for any other person, we borrow this money for the people of Kenya. Is it that the quality of life of the people of Kenya has improved since President William Ruto came to power? At least for President Uhuru Kenyatta, when he came to power, maybe we can say that the 437 billion that he had accumulated in debts, Honorable Speaker, in his first year, he was able to make our secondary school education almost affordable and almost free, Honorable Speaker, and that is a fact. Then we need to then put to test this new administration of President William Ruto. How much has out of this 1.2 trillion, how much has gone to making the lives of the people of Kenya better in his first 1 year in office, Honorable Speaker? You all must appreciate, and we all must appreciate, in his first year of his presidency, the taxes went very high. And he was saying that we need to be very patriotic. We need to give as much as we can, and we need to stop borrowing, and so that we can develop and we can grow our own country using our own money. He was saying that if you are able to spare a shilling or two from your payslip, a shilling or two in your taxes, then we shall be able to ensure that we can be able to have a balanced budget. What has happened 3 years later, Honorable Speaker? Now our deficit in our budget is now running to trillions of money. It's the first time that we are seeing this kind of a deficit in a budget, in a national budget, Honorable Speaker. And he's going on to borrow, and it is not that the quality of the life of the people of Kenya is getting better. If you are to put that statement to test, Honorable Speaker, you know that a board, just one board of gypsum, in 2022 when William Ruto became president, was costing 630 shillings. Now, 3 years into his presidency, it is costing more than 1,000 shillings, Honorable Speaker. University education, by the time William Ruto became president of this republic, Honorable Speaker, it was at least 44,000 per student every year, every academic year, Honorable Speaker. In his new university funding model, students are paying up to 240,000 for one student, one academic year, Honorable Speaker. He has made life extremely expensive, and it has become extremely difficult to be a Kenyan, Honorable Speaker. That is why you feel you hear every time, Honorable Speaker, most of you are saying that they want the freedom of the payslip because they cannot see what this money is. They cannot feel the impact of the money that they have added to the government in terms of taxes versus the services that they are getting from the government, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we would have expected, and it is the general expectation of the people of Kenya, that in terms of service delivery, you are supposed to get better services when our national budgets are growing. If, for example, Honorable Speaker, I was to spend, by the time I became a member of parliament here, Honorable Speaker, I think I was paying about 2,700 for my health insurance. Now I think I'm paying about 37,000, according to the new arrangement that was brought by President William Ruto. If indeed I was to access health care, and I don't need to spend my own money again, I would feel that it was worth it. But what has happened? Our health system has collapsed, and you know it, Honorable Speaker. Every time you hear, you have Harambes, you are a member of parliament and you know it. People are suffering in the villages. You are paying more and you are suffering more. What has become of this country, Honorable Speaker? Why is William Ruto running down this country? Because we need to ask ourselves, why is he running down this country? We don't have any other country. He also wants to, even if he anyway, Honorable Speaker, these are difficult things, and I also want to quickly run to one person who gave his memoranda to this particular committee, and he said that we should try and reduce government wastage on or prudence in the way we use our national resources. Honorable Speaker, when President William Ruto came, he said that we are cutting on all wastages in government. In fact, we were told that austerity measures are setting in. We were told that, including in Parliament here, you know, we were told that we have to reduce our foreign travels, we have to reduce our domestic travel. It has happened in Parliament. I'm told that, I mean, the way we travel now is not the same way we used to travel when we came in here. But what happens at the National Executive? Because that is also something that we need to test. Why is it that his budget his State House budget keeps growing every financial year? It's not that he has new members of staff. It's not that he has new services or he's getting more guests than he was getting so that he can increase his hospitality budget. What was it in State House that he found? Were the roofs leaking in State House that he had to make it? He had to spend billions of money in a country that people are suffering on very basic issues on health, Honorable Speaker. But he has the money to ensure that he can repair almost all state lodges around the Republic, Honorable Speaker. How many can he sleep in, even within one financial year? Why can't he do them progressively? Why would he not then do the State House in Nairobi and leave the rest and do them progressively, Honorable Speaker? He is renovating a State House in Nyeri, renovating another State House in Bungoma, renovating the State House in Nakuru, renovating State House in Mombasa, renovating State House I don't know where. Why does he want to live like a king? And the people that he's leading, the people of Kenya, are suffering and they are sleeping hungry. What becomes, I mean, what Honorable Speaker, what joy does he gain in having the best parishes State House in Africa, in the region? You know, he says that he wants the State House of Kenya to be the level of the White House of the United States, Honorable Speaker. Is he leading people who have as much quality of life as the people of the United States, Honorable Speaker? He runs down the health system of Kenya, then he wants to live like a king. Honorable Speaker, tell me, because you know it. As we work on on government, reducing government wastage, Honorable Speaker, tell me how and why it is important, and I would want my colleagues to tell me why it is important, that for every one project that has been commissioned, the President has to commission it 5 times. Tell me, Honorable Speaker, because the President was in Nairobi, why would he have to spend a lot of money? You saw the kind of entourage that he was moving with when he was commissioning projects in Nairobi. Tell me, Honorable Speaker, why it was extremely important for him to move in entourages of 50 SUVs, have mobilized people to come and clap for him.
Honorable Senator Matthew, I know you have very hearty contributions towards this motion, but I want to remind you of the provisions of the Standing Order 101 on the content of speech, because you are contributing to a report on debt management. but the way your contributions are good, and for which you then need to move a specific motion. So you should confine yourself to the relevance of what the report that you're contributing to, so that if that report in any manner then points to the fact that it's the president that is doing the budgets and not the treasury, then you would move towards the line of argument you have taken. But under bit on the person of the president.
Honorable Speaker, I know you have a responsibility of protecting the president. Is your party leader and my party leader, for that matter. Gone to page 20.
Are you picking something on that report?
Page that one. Just
let me have the report. What page was that?
The William Ruto is not State House. The controller.
Yes, Senator, I have not seen the mention.
William Ruto is not State House. The controller.
Yes, Senator, I have not seen the mention of the.
I'm saying, Honorable.
Confine yourself to
okay.
the report.
All,
yeah.
all right.
Thank
okay.
you.
I know it's a bit. That very good gentleman made that particular observation that we need to ensure that we reduce government waste. It is beautiful, but does it reflect the lives of the people of Kenya? Is it the same as to the quality of the life of the people of Kenya, Honorable Speaker? Maybe finally, before there's a recommendation that has been made by the Committee on Finance that I think, to this extent, I would want to agree with. Automation of the, to this extent, I would want to agree with. Automation of the withdrawal of the debt service payment from the consolidated fund, Honorable Speaker. You know the debt, this debt, national debt, Honorable Speaker, has become, national debt, Honorable Speaker, has become an extremely opaque thing, Honorable Speaker. You're not able to tell how much we paid within what time. For the county debts, Honorable Speaker, which we call the pending bills, Honorable Speaker, you have a view because they are managed to do the integrated financial management system, IFMIS, Honorable Speaker. You're able to tell this was the date, it was accrued this time, this is what has been done to this date, Honorable Speaker. Why can't we have the same so that we can be able to follow and we can be able to understand how our national debt is flowing, Honorable Speaker? We can be able to know, Honorable Speaker, exactly why, how this money that we have taken as national debt, Honorable Speaker, how it has been used, Honorable Speaker. And maybe finally, and that's where I was before you interrupted me. Then you can guide me on whether I'm discussing the conduct of the president. Why would the state be spending money, millions of money, so that the president can go and commission a project? Honorable Speaker, case on point, I'll give you an example. For 3 times, President William Ruto has been to Nyandarua. He commissioned one road called Dunyonjeru Geta Captain Road. On one instance, he commissioned it at the captain side. On another instance, he commissioned it at the Geta side, Honorable Speaker. I hear that he's coming next, I think in a week or two, to commission it at the Geta side, Honorable Speaker. How are we spending our money? How do we say that Kenya is broke and we are spending millions of money just for commissioning projects, Honorable Speaker? Why did we never, ever even see, even for one time, President Kibaki, one of the most celebrated presidents of this republic, Honorable Speaker, on top of car saying that nimetenga, nimesema, nimefanya, why can't the president just come quietly and commission a project that is complete? Why does he keep launching projects, and once he launches at that project, he leaves, the contractor follows him? Now, Honorable Speaker, of all the things that he has promised in Nyandarua, he is coming to repromise again. And we are spending national money because he does not come around. For the president to be in any county, Honorable Speaker, it will require and it will spend a lot of money. Senator, I know the president has now new defenders.
You have a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know I understand where Senator Methu comes from. And Madam Speaker, you know, these are standing orders of this house are very clear. And one year attempting to rule on, Madam Speaker, but I know that sometimes it makes it more substance when a senator raises it. Madam Speaker, 101 says, 101.1, neither the personal conduct of the President, nor the conduct of the Speaker, or any other judge, nor the judicial conduct of any other person performing judicial functions, nor any conduct of the head of state or government, or the representative in Kenya of any friendly country, or the conduct of the holder of an office whose removal from such office is dependent upon a decision of the Senate, shall be referred to adversely. The word I was looking for here is adversely, except upon a specific substantive motion of which at least 3 days notice has to be given. Mr. Speaker, I find the senator for Nyandarua being adverse, because I am very interested in what he's saying. I'm interested when he says that the head of state has used millions of money going to launch projects in his area, which he hasn't used to launch projects in my area, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I would wish that he brings a substantive motion to this effect, because the MDTA is a very important part of conversation that we must be able to manage debt. This debate about MDDS, Madam Speaker, is not a debate on what the President is doing currently in launching the projects. While that is a matter of interest for Senator Methu, but he's being so adverse in it that I find it juicy, that I feel like he will execute it better when he brings a substantive motion,
Senator
so that even us you can
Eddie,
know to participate.
just before we get to 6:30, I'll be adding another 10 minutes to help us finalize this motion and have the reply by Senator Tabitha.
Yes, so Madam Speaker, what I'm saying is that Senator Methu is trying to be adverse in his conversation. I don't have a problem with him pinpointing about projects that are being launched here and there, but I think it needs a substantive discussion, because it is not relevant to the debt management strategy, but most important, interest in that conversation. But then the standing orders requires a substantive motion, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I wish that you rule him out of order up until he brings a substantive motion on this conversation, Madam Speaker. I thank you.
Let me dispense with this point of order first. We have a point of order already given by Senator Eddie, and I'll dispense with it first. Senator Methu, you have heard the issue that has been raised under that point of order, and I had guided and given you a direction on it. So don't wade into that adverse mention of the person of the presidency until you bring a substantive motion and give a notice of 3 days. And so that we don't waste time, I'll give you a chance to finish your submissions, and then we'll proceed on. What's your point of order, Senator Methu? Senator Karongo Dangwa, you know you look the same lately. You walk too closely, so you really do look like real brothers.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. You know, Madam Speaker, wonders will never cease to happen that it is Senator of Migori who is standing to defend President William Ruto on the floor of the House.
Senator,
my point of order.
Senator Dangwa, what's your point of order and under which standing order?
Standing order 105, statement of facts.
Proceed.
It's very sad, and I would want you to rule Senator of Migori out of order. Because, Madam Speaker, the standing orders...
maintain your silence.
Yes,
the Speaker
please.
is in charge.
The standing orders...
If you deal with it, just maintain your silence so that he can be heard.
Because all we are doing,
he's on his feet. Maintain your calm and cool.
All we are doing, Madam Speaker,
proceed,
we are just interfering with the debates by Senator Methu. The standing orders are very clear. If there is an issue any senator would want to be either informed, either mentioned, there's request for statement. We cannot have the senator of Migori telling the senator of Nyandarua to tell him what the president is supposed to have done in Migori
or not, Madam Speaker. It is the prerogative or the mandate of the senator here to request for a statement on the floor of the House and say the president has been launching programs in other counties and not launching in Migori. But do not defend the president here when the Senator Medhu says that he has been launching programs who is not seeing, and they are not free. Money is being used, people are being carjacked, people are being having their bags taken, people are being stolen for. Madam Speaker, what I'm trying to say is rule him out of order. So that we can give the Senate an opportunity, because he is discussing this MTDS, Madam Speaker, so that we have to understand why is Kenya, or why is the government saying there is no money? Yes, there's misuse, Madam Speaker. The misuse is so much that we are even, Madam Speaker, telling our children we are going to give them chapati. We have finished all the development programs. The only thing that is remaining is chapati, Madam Speaker.
Senator Thangwa, I do not know where you are driving us into with that debate, because the question you're raising, Senator Medhu, I've not given you the floor, so resume your seat. Senator Thangwa, the issue you are now raising is under Standing Order 105. Nobody has requested for facts. What Senator Eddy referred Senator Medhu to was Standing Order 101 on the contents of speech, and when the person of the president is mentioned, an issue I had even given a guidance on, but Senator Medhu still veered away from the directive of the speaker, from the directions of the speaker. So I want to once again rule your point of order. It's out of order, actually, because it did not respond to the issues, and it introduced an issue which the chair had dispensed with. So I will allow Senator Medhu to proceed on with the submissions and to stick within the guidelines offered by the speaker.
I don't know why Senator Tabitha is really eager to have me conclude, but Honorable Speaker, what should not be in the content of my speech is the conduct of the president. And the dictionary definition of the conduct is a personal behavior, way of acting, or bearing of a person. I've not discussed the personal behavior of President William Ruto. I'm only speaking about the office that he holds. So that is quite different, Honorable Speaker, because as as part of my argument...
Senator Medhu, I guided you that that issue is dispensed with by the chair.
I am well-guided, Chair.
If you have any other issue beyond that issue, you proceed on so that your minutes can be spent.
Of course, I know why I'm being disrupted, but I'll still say what I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that we cannot keep saying, we borrow because we don't have enough. The reason why we keep borrowing is because we, as a country, assume that we don't have enough. But tell me, Honorable Speaker, and now I am on the narrow path of not mentioning anybody. Tell me, Honorable Speaker, how a country which borrows money because we don't have money would have enough and a surplus to give students 1 million chapatis in a day, which, if you were to just give them a price, for example, of 20 shillings a chapati, that would make it 20 million a day. In a week, if they are to go to school for 5 days, that would make it 100 million a week. If they were to be there for a month, that would make it 400 million a month. If you are then to take it to a year, it would be 1.2 billion in a year, if that is correct. So, Honorable Speaker, if you have this kind of money, Honorable Speaker, why are we borrowing? What justification do we have, Honorable Speaker, to continue borrowing when we are planting the same resource, Honorable Speaker? The people of Kenya would want to feel, they would want to see what this money, because you see, borrowing is the easier thing, but the bigger responsibility and the bigger burden is on repayment, Honorable Speaker. The repayment is on the people of Kenya. It is not President William Ruto or anybody or any of us who is in government who repays this money, who repays these loans, Honorable Speaker. The burden of repayment of our national debt is specifically on the shoulders of the people of Kenya. We cannot spend money just anyhow, Honorable Speaker, and then we expect the people of Kenya to continue clapping for us. When we are the state is using millions of money to go and mock its own citizens, Honorable Speaker, because a person in a village in Migori will see SUVs in their hundreds, Honorable Speaker, SUVs of the state. I'm not on any person. SUVs of the state, Honorable Speaker, just to go and launch one small project, Honorable Speaker. I think we are mocking the people of Kenya. This is not what the people of Kenya expected from the leadership and from the regime that is ruling us now, Honorable Speaker. I don't want to say anything more than that. I know what that consultation will emanate to, or how it will end up. And before I am rudely interrupted, let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Methu. We have no further interventions from the senators, so I will request Senator Tabitha Mutinda to now reply. Senator Methu, you have to stop confusing the whole House with your presence, with your huge presence. Proceed. Maybe. Proceed, Senator Tabitha.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can see we are really behind time. I hope you'll be able to just give me extra 2 minutes.
That's granted.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, because I don't want really to repeat myself so much. I want to really appreciate all colleagues that have been able to contribute to the medium-term strategy that as a committee we've really been able to embark on. I really want to thank my colleagues, starting with my chair, then my very good friend, Senator Eddy, for very high commitment, Madam Speaker, and the rest of my colleagues as well. Just to mention a few things, Madam Speaker. You know, as a country, where we go wrong at times is just politicizing everything. The matter before us, Madam Speaker, is a very critical issue. Medium-term debt, a matter that every year as a House we prosecute, Madam Speaker. And it is so sad at times when we don't see the bigger picture. These issues of debt are not just personal issues, but are issues that are going to affect our future generation if as leaders we do not address. When I hear colleagues questioning, and it is in their right to question when it comes to expenditure. But Madam Speaker, let us tell each other the truth. The truth is that one of our key responsibilities is oversight. And that mandate of oversight is within us as members of parliament. The National Assembly that oversees the national government, and the Senate that oversees the counties. When we talk about these debts that are in place, it is our responsibility to be able to get the audit reports, analyze the audit reports, and give correct recommendation. Mwananchi has vested that mandate to us, and it is us to ensure that when it comes to matters of public debt, the other time the president did propose a committee that due to politics it was rejected. But I'm happy with the Ministry of Finance has taken up and is ensuring that the Auditor General is able to give this House, both houses of Parliament, a report on the level of debts, where we are with the debts, the repayment, the duration, and also when you look at where we are at currently, we are at 65% from the PFM Act mandate of 55% of the GDP, Madam Speaker. And these are concerns that are all for us. It should not be just deviated to individuals, then we lose the focus on how, as a House, we should play our role. We should be focusing on ensuring that the Ministry of Finance does show these houses that how it's going to ensure that it comes from the 65% and reduce it to the 55%, which is within the PFM Act, Madam Speaker, because that is what is currently in law, Madam Speaker. As a House, as a committee, we had made recommendations, especially when it comes to the system, the IFMI system. It should be a system that is able to ensure all debts are paid, like the pending bills are paid within the recommended time. We talked as a committee and said that the consolidated fund, Madam Speaker, by 31st of May 2025, any debt should be should automatically be paid using the consolidated fund, among many other, Madam Speaker. But because time does not allow, I also want to appreciate all the stakeholders, the Secretariat that have been able to support us. And with those many and few remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to reply. And I do request that at this point, because we don't have numbers, I request you put the question tomorrow as per Standing Order 66.
Is deferred to the next sitting of this House, which is tomorrow. Honorable, extended the hours of sitting. That's tomorrow, Thursday.
Kindly alert. We are behind schedule by those who have program books. Starts on page 19. Sorry, page 21, the lower section, and runs up to page 22. So today we shall be discussing sub-theme 2, which is water and environment for climate action. But of course we discuss this alongside the overall theme, which is water and environmental resources for enhanced resilience and improved income and livelihoods. So that is the overall theme. But today we have a theme that we shall be concentrating at, which is water and environment for climate action. It is a panelists that will discuss this sub-theme of water and environment for climate action. I have a team that will be running us through this session. A team of very beautiful ladies that will help moderate the morning session. And these are none other than Miss Mary Namukose from GIZ. I would request you to step up. And Miss Bridget Nimsima, a youth and young professional. So they will be steering us through this morning session. You are most welcome. But before we start, we shall open the session with a prayer. And we have a canon designate, Engineer Annette Nantongo Turiamureva. So Engineer Annette, I call upon you to lead us through the opening prayer. And thereafter, the moderators will take charge of the session. See you at break.
Gentlemen, today we will say the official prayer of the Ministry of Water and Environment. So let's humble ourselves in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of this new day. We thank you for the gift of life and health that you have granted us. We thank you for our families and our motherland, Uganda. We thank you for entrusting us with the leadership of this office, of the country, and all our different offices, and for the privilege to serve our country. We implore you, Lord, to grant us guidance in our management of this office, and especially during this third Uganda Water and Environment Day, and during our deliberations today. May the decisions we make serve the best interest of our country and bring glory to your name. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Just turn to your neighbor, at least of a smile, of a good morning. It's right and it's in order to do so, yes. And we should be grateful that we are here this morning. There are those who would have liked to be here, but they are not here. So by the fact that you've made it here, just turn to your neighbor and say good morning. Good morning, my neighbor. Yes, my name is Mary Namkose, as introduced by the Commissioner, and I work for GIZ in the project that supports transboundary water cooperation in the Nile Basin, and I'll be co-moderating this session with Bridget. Bridget, would you like to say hello to our audience?
Good morning to you all. Welcome to Day 3 of UWEC 2025. My name is Bridget Nimsima, and I'll be co-moderating with Miss Mary. Thank you.
Yes, we would like to be sure that our online participants are also getting us very well. Can the IT team just help us to check whether the online participants are getting us well? Maybe if we could get someone online to just say hello. Yes, and our keynote is right over there. We'd like to be sure that you're getting us all. Yeah, to start our session, there is a video which we will have before we go into the session. So we would like to request the IT team to play the video, please.